Good morning, everyone. It's time to get started. Welcome to the March 14th, 2022 Grants Pass City Council Workshop. Nice to see your faces today. All right. We have a few different items on the agenda today, and first up, we're going to be hearing from Matt Lund, the director of the YMCA, about a project that they have going. Welcome, Matt.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Well, we started out today just, first off, I want to say thank you for allowing me to come up and present what I'm going to present today. And really, this is more of a concept and the possibilities of what we can do more here in Grants Pass together by looking to partner with the city, looking to partner with the Boys and Girls Club, looking to partner with the library. I mean, the possibilities are endless. And this really is a concept today, and it all started from the conversation around the caveman pool. And, you know, I know the council has talked about remodeling, what that could look like, how that could serve the community in the future. And as I was listening to those conversations happening, and the conversations that I've had with my board at the YMCA, it became clear that we could really do a whole lot more than just do a remodel. We could actually look to build something great in this community and serve. And so that's where this conversation started and how we got to where we are today. The one thing I've realized in the little over 3 years that I've been here as the CEO of the YMCA is that not a lot of people know the footprint that the Y holds here in this community, of a community of 40,000. And so what I wanted to do is just share some quick information about the Y and the type of footprint that we hold and how we imprint on people's lives here. So the impact that Grants Pass has, the Grants Pass YMCA, the first question I always ask is, did you know that we employed more than 220 people at the YMCA? Now, this is pre-pandemic. Before the pandemic hit, we did employ 220 employees. Right now, we're sitting at about 96 individuals that we have on our payroll. And so we've had people move out of the area, people retired, and some people just are not ready to come back to work yet. I love the fact that we've gotten rid of the masks, but some people just are not ready to come back yet. And the other part that people don't know is that we actually had more than 180 volunteers at the YMCA. And so as far as having a purpose, having an opportunity for people to come and be a part of something every day, between being employed and also having volunteers, we are one of the major people here in this community. So again, this is a 2019 number. We are building back up to it. At the time, we had 7,100 active members at the YMCA. Now, when you talk about a community of 40,000, that is a large imprint for one organization to have. Currently, we're at about 5,300 members, and we're slowly starting to build back up. And in fact, even today, we've had more members come back because of the mask mandate being removed. Typically, on any given day, we'd have about 1,400 people that would visit our YMCA. So if you can imagine having that many people come through. Overall, throughout the year, we would serve roughly about 12,000 community members, and that is also including our membership as well. And then we actually served more than 16,000 meals in 2019. It is obviously a little less, but during the last 2 years, we have served as the emergency childcare for many of our first responders and also served meals as well, partnering with the school district. So kids that learn to swim at the YMCA, we had more than 1,600 kids. And this is again 2019, it is building back up. And then we had over 153 adults that had learned to swim that year. And then as far as our after-school program, we have summer camps and after-school programs. We had more than 1,300 kids come through our programs. We also work with DHS, the Department of Human Services, and the foster care families in giving free and discounted membership. So that way they have a place of being. And then as far as our youth, now this is a current number because in 2019 we had 560 youth come through and do youth sports at our facility. We actually in 2021 had 2,100 kids come through and do youth sports in our facility. And then we had more than 450 adults that had played sports, and that's through our soccer program and our adult volleyball program that we have at the Y. So many people don't know this, is that we provide senior trips around Oregon, whether they are lunch trips or they are weekend trips whale watching. They're very random, but really it's to bring together seniors in the area that may have lost a loved one, that need that social aspect, and we have done senior trips for the last at least 10 years. But in 2019, we had more than 370 seniors be a part of those trips to go on those day trips or weekend trips. And then we served more than 1,800 families through our specialized programs such as Halloween with the Y, Turkey Trot, and Healthy Kids Day. We typically fundraise right around $90,000 a year, and in 2019 we awarded out more than $285,000 for scholarships and discounts towards membership. And in 2021 we actually scholarshiped and discounted out $420,000 because of the need that was in this community. So what this really means altogether, to keep it short, is there's really 6 dimensions that we focus on. So before I came here, I was actually the CEO of the National Wellness Institute. And I made sure to bring over that wellness aspect into the YMCA here, that we can actually serve our community to the best of our ability. And that means occupationally, providing jobs, the physical aspect, giving a place to work out, the social aspect of it, intellectual, spiritual, and emotional. And all these things are to help people go from coping in life to thriving in life. So that is just a rough, quick run through of how we impact our community and the type of numbers that we're talking about. And so what I want to present now is looking at the possibilities of building a new facility and looking to expand our services. Some of the numbers that you saw on there were based on kids learning to swim. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, except for the people that take part, is that we actually are the home for the 3 high schools in the area for their swim programs. So the high school kids come and they practice at our YMCA. They hold their meets at our YMCA. And those programs are growing, and we need more space as well. And so as we're looking to expand in a new facility and expand our aquatics department and what we can offer, we also have a lot of seniors that need therapy pools. We need kids that are of young age to have 0 depth entry pool. And that's some of the possibilities that we could have as we look at a new YMCA in this area. So here's the presentation that is on the 11 by 17 printout. So I wanted to bring some examples of actual YMCAs that partnered with cities from around the country, and that's what's on those printouts there. So the concept that we're talking about is YMCAs and municipalities have mission-driven alignments of goals around healthy living, youth development, and social responsibility, collaborating to share knowledge, experience, and resources, and leverage unique assets allows municipalities to provide first-rate amenities without having the burden and focusing on funding all the facets of operation. So the primary benefits and synergies is increased access to diverse capital funding sources, shared development costs, shared annual operating expenses, and leveraged expertise in center operations and program delivery, and also leverage experience in facility development and facility management. So in the printout, instead of having to read through it, if you'd like to take a look at it real quick, really the considerations to take between partnering with the YMCA and municipalities and some of the benefits that are there. If you'd like to take a minute just to read it. And then as we look on to some of the facilities that are part of this, what was pulled from Oklahoma, Ohio, Minnesota, Alberta, Calgary, and Southgate, Michigan. So these are just sample YMCAs of what they look like from the outside, and then what these YMCAs did in partnering with the cities. So for example, this Mitch Park City, they built a brand new facility, 105,000 square feet. The city contributed land and capital for a new community center. The YMCA manages and operates the entire center, and the city shares in operation expenses. Obviously, this is all focused on taking the burden off what the city is trying to do to serve its community, but using an expert to do that, which then alleviates the pressure off the city. This is the Delaware branch in Columbus, Ohio. The YMCA operates the facility. It was actually funded through a levy and bond and working in partnership with the city and the YMCA. And then it built a 60,000 square foot facility. and it has a long-term management agreement with the city. So another one in Columbus, Ohio. They have built a full YMCA facility, a recreation center located in a community park. It was 49,000 square feet. What they looked at for here is how do they put recreation with Parks and Rec, the YMCA, and the city to help take care of the needs in the community. And this was in Forest Lake, Minnesota. So a new facility with a recreation center, which also helped with the school district aquatic center. So it was 52,000 square feet, roughly about 14.5 million. The way they partnered with the city was providing 9.3 acres, and the city funded 9 million of it. And the YMCA management agreement is responsible for operating the burden of the facility. And then the YMCA went out and fundraised 5.5 million in capital. And then the YMCA owned outright the property. So again, another full facility that was built. The city contributed capital to the YMCA, and the developer contributed the land. And so, again, we're looking at an aquatic center and a facility. So these are all examples, and again, they're in the printout there. And I know you guys had about a 15-minute timeline, so I don't want to take up too much time on looking at these. But really what I want to get to on some of these are the pictures here that we have in place, is to, again, give a concept of the idea of what the building could look like. So having a very open, community-driven facility, somewhere that everyone feels welcome, the social environment, there is not a lot of bricks and mortar in the way. It's a place that everyone feels welcome. And so a community-driven center. And here you have more for childcare, STEM programs, places that were built for the youth and families to come in and spend their evenings or their weekends with a purpose. And then obviously the childcare is important because this area we are lacking so much in childcare. A community space that would allow for seniors, community events to happen. You have a kitchen where you can work on nutrition and teaching people how to cook healthy meals. And again, providing a safe place for our teens to come in and do homework and hang out after school. And then this here is getting back to the caveman pool aspect of it, is that part of this facility would look to have a full recreation center. And so something where we could house multiple basketball courts, multiple volleyball courts, and a much larger pool area. And what that means to the city and the community in Southern Oregon is if we're able to have a facility similar to this, we can not only run bigger basketball tournaments, bigger volleyball tournaments, indoor pickleball tournaments. We can host more community events within these facilities. But then when you look at the pool, you look at a therapy pool for seniors. You look at the, I believe there's another picture here with a lazy river. Sorry, I don't see the picture in here, but there's a lazy river as well that's used for therapy. And so then you also look at a pool that would have 8 lap lanes instead of 6 lap lanes. And so again, more kids are able to take part in that. We're able to run bigger swim meets. And so in doing all that, we're able to then generate more money for the community, bringing people from outside our community in to spend money at restaurants, hotels, downtown shopping. And then obviously getting back to employment and what it means to providing more jobs for individuals here as well. So we'd obviously include studio space and a healthy living center. And then we can also look at outdoor pools as well, providing zero-depth entry pools, providing pools, therapy pools on the outside, slides for kids, slides for families, and even if seniors wish to go out there as well, fantastic. But it is a place of the community, and it's a place to have a safe space and obviously some enjoyment. So in doing that, looking at this type of facility and looking at the amenities that could be provided in this, again, the numbers I shared with you earlier of serving 12,000 people a year with a facility like this, we can look to serve 15,000, 20,000, 25,000 people here in our community a year because of the amenities that we're looking to add into this new facility. And the YMCA is not going to be able to do this on our own. And so what we're looking at is partnering with the city, looking to partner with the county, looking to partner with the bigger businesses here in this area, private donors. And then in doing that, we can go out to larger foundations and look to search for funding for grants, state funding as well. For example, the Salem YMCA ended up getting about $6 million from the state. The Eugene YMCA got about $15 million from the state to help build a new facility. But it was done in partnership with the city and the county and other businesses that were local. So in saying all this, I would love to answer any questions that you have or any thoughts that you have.
Thanks, Matt. Council, what questions do you have? Rob?
So you presented a huge variety, I shouldn't say huge variety, but a really broad swath of potential project, of the size of the project. So we're talking about indoor pools, outdoor pools. So if you had your, we'll call it the Taj Mahal of YMCA's for a town this size,
Yeah.
Ballpark dollar figure.
You're looking about $30 to $40 million.
Okay. So if you had just, we'll say, indoor pools, in other words, an expansion of the existing Y concept without all the bells and whistles, what kind of ballpark are we looking at?
You could probably do somewhere in the vicinity of about 25 million.
Thank you.
Kurt?
Obviously, some sexy pictures there, and that would be great. If we moved ahead with something like this, what would happen to the ownership of the existing building?
So that building is actually owned by the county. So our contract is up in 10 years with the county, and that's why the conversation has started between my board and myself. It actually started in 2019. And at that time, because of the membership that we had and the programs that we had going, we really had maxed out the space that was in that current facility. And so we were starting to look to see what our options were for growing in the future. We do have the option to extend that contract, first right of refusal. There's been some other developments in that area that have been great for the community. Some of it we still are unknown because of what has happened out there. But the Y was looking for a space before any of that development had happened because we knew the greater potential of what we could serve in our community and as we continue to grow.
Thanks.
Valerie?
Yes, thank you, Matt. I have a question because I really don't understand the workings of the Y. Is it a nonprofit?
We're a nonprofit 501c3.
Okay, that's what I wasn't sure of. So it is, and then you do also have membership fees, am I correct? Or how does
Yes,
that work?
we do. So we have membership fees, day passes, and program fees.
Okay, thank you.
Brian?
Thanks, Matt. I have heard through the grapevine that you've already had some conversations with the county and with RCC about this. Is there anything you can share as far as how that's progressing?
Sure. The county conversation has been around the possibilities of moving. It was also about how do we make the things work where we currently are and what would that look like if we extend it out. This conversation around a new building has just really become more public here within the last couple months, beyond the conversations with my board and myself. And the RCC conversation was with myself and the current president, who's retiring this June, then they'll be hiring on a new president. We were looking at land and options that were out there at RCC. It is a little far out, but we thought if the land is donated and the partnership is correct with future building, would that be the right place? And that was really what the conversation was about. Unfortunately, because of the way the land is laid out, water rights and everything else, it was going to be too expensive and too hard to try to build the type of facility and the size and the amount of land that we need in order to get that facility taken care of. The great thing about it, though, in this conversation, we've learned many ways that the YMCA can partner with RCC to help support it. And in fact, Corey, who's one of the vice presidents out there, along with Kathy, who is the current president, we had talked about if we were able to build a facility like this, we could actually house a lot of their athletic programs out of this facility as well. So we have multiple pieces that we can, just as the YMCA, can contribute to the community and support and partner with.
Thank you.
Other questions? Joel?
Matt, thank you for coming. Do you have any existing information gathering efforts that your organization is funding for such a facility in the community?
So this is just the beginning of it. This is really the adventuring part. You know, who could be partners? Where could funding come from? How do we start to structure this? We're really, at this point, building the foundation piece of it. And in that, we can find out who would like to partner and who do we move forward with. I can't remember if it was some of the city council or some others that have been asking about this, but it came into play around what could the funding look like? How does this funding come about? What does the partnership look like? And who's going to design the building? And I said, really, this is why I'm reaching out to the city and I'm reaching out to the county, is that I don't want it to be what facility design I think it should be. And I've been putting out feelings around and having conversations with other community stakeholders and leaders, saying I'd love to invite people to the Y and have a conversation around, what do you see being in this facility? What do you think is needed to serve our facility or our community better in this facility? And so in doing that, I would love to hear the ideas. And Grow Development, who actually helped me put this presentation together and give me the pictures, Grow Development is an organization that works on the design and works on working with contractors and the development of these type of projects. And so they would be also there to help as well. And so it's really getting all the community input on what needs to go into this building. So we're not only serving currently, but what do we look like and how we serve in 50 years from now, in 70 years from now, 100 years from now? What is that going to look like in our community?
So then I had a second question, Matt. You know the song YMCA?
Yes.
It's a place to stay, you know?
Yes.
So the young man can go there. And my wife likes that. We sang that one time at karaoke, and we kind of...
I won't sing it for you right now.
Yeah, but we kind of butchered it, yeah. But anyway, what are the options with affordable housing? The Y has a rich tradition of some past use of affordable housing. What's the connection? What are the possibilities of affordable housing here in the future with such a organization and such a facility?
Sure, there are some YMCAs in New York and in Chicago. The one in Chicago I've been to, the one in New York I've seen pictures of. But what they've done basically, they have built these communities and then put the Y in the middle of them. And in some of those, the YMCA actually runs and manages it. So the city doesn't have to, but it works in partnership on the expenses. And so there is the possibility. I know years ago, the YMCA used to build kind of like hotels, and then they would have Ys built within that. They've moved more away from that because of the sustainability factor. And where the Y comes in is the operation aspect of it. So yes, you can build housing around it, and whether they're condos or apartments, and then put a Y there to help then manage the project with the city.
Thank you.
Rick?
Thank you, Matt. You mentioned you're looking forward 10 years for this project to go forward. Is that what because that takes time to get the funding and time to draw the plans and select the site and get everybody on board? Would that be a normal timeline?
So actually it could be done quicker, depending on the support and the funding that would come in, whether it was through donors or it was through foundations or grants. And the great thing about right now is typically you would want to pace this out a little bit, but because of coming out of the pandemic and the amount of funding that is there now for the states in organizations of the type of services that we provide, there's a lot of funding there that has never been there before. And so this could happen quicker than 10 years. Really 10 years is when our contract ends with the county. Now again, we can't extend that out, but our timeline that we're looking at is really within that 3 to 5 year mark, look to do fundraising and really start the groundbreaking in 3 to 5 years from now. And then have it built within 1 to 2 years after that.
So on that schedule, is there ever an opportunity to do the construction in phases? Like if there's a need like right now, and I realize Grants Pass is looking at redoing the Caveman Pool, but if we were to reach an agreement and decide to move forward to partner with you, would there be an ability to push and focus on the pool faster and proceed if everything fell into place, or does that not the way normally things are done?
No, you definitely can. In fact, the phases that my board and I have talked about in doing this was building a recreation and aquatic center first while getting the funding, and then finishing the branch because we have that 10-year mark. We can still operate our business, but now we're running the 2 sites. And then when we finish out with the rest of the funding, build the rest of the extension. And so the idea is to build a full aquatic center and then recreation site first. So that way we're getting the servicing, we're producing revenue, we're drawing in more revenue for the city, and also building our base really revenue for the Y. And then we go out to get the rest of the funding and then start building the second half of the facility. So you're talking about a 100,000 square foot facility.
Valerie?
I guess that brings me to the question, footprint are you looking at? Because like I said, if you're going to look for a piece of land or you're looking for land, you kind of have to have an idea of what you think will meet that need?
We need about 10 acres of land is what we need. So whether it's about that 8 to 10 acre spot for it to have enough parking for the facility and the facility itself. And I know the city owns some of the land. There could be options there, but I think this is a great place to start that conversation.
Are there other questions? What do you see as the relationship between this and the city has previously decided to go ahead and rebuild Caveman Pool or build a new pool at that site? How does that affect your plans?
So I know that there's a lot of passion and a lot of desire from some to keep that pool where it is. And I think that on the north side of town, it's great to have that. But looking at the bigger picture on how we could serve more and the operational aspect and sustainability is that if we could look to reallocate those funds and putting it towards what we're talking about today, and then also looking at possible land from the city, that's something that would help with just starting us off to find those funds and get our project moving forward.
Thank you. Brian?
I have a question for staff, and I know Brad's not here, but I've been asking for the numbers for the Caveman pool season from last year, and I thought that was going to be either sent out in a memo before today's presentation or presented as part of today's presentation. So I don't know if I missed that or if that's still coming, but I just wanted to check on that.
Yeah, we don't have the Caveman pool numbers for you today. We'll try to get it to a memo to you on that or an email and get that to you.
Aaron, were those numbers that like the daily attendance numbers and that? Is that what we're talking about? Or are you talking about the financials? Financials? Okay. On our end, we can share the budget because we kept both sides of it. Obviously, the Y running the operations of the Caveman pool. I can get back and work on that. I did not know those were requested, and so I can go ahead and work on that.
Rob?
Yeah, Aaron, is there a way, or do we keep track of it? I'm just wondering how many people who use the existing Caveman pool walk or ride their bikes there and that kind of thing. I have no idea.
Yeah, that's something we haven't tracked. I'm not sure how we don't have those numbers.
Yeah, it just makes, when we're talking about RCC, I'm thinking, well, there's no chance for kids to ride their bike there. There's no chance for pedestrians. There's obviously buses, but I'm just wondering, because it's clearly not centrally located, if it's way out of town. Yeah. So, 8 to 10 acres, I realize is not easy to come by, but by the same token, location is also really important. So something that's more centrally located than something on the outskirts, to me, could make a difference in my feeling about this project.
Well, I will put it out there that there is some land over by Allendale Elementary School that the city owns, which could be an opportunity for the space. And knowing that that is a future home or could be future home for affordable housing to go out in that area on top of the current communities that are out there, there's a lot of access for families to be able to walk to or ride bikes to, especially being right there in the back seat of Allendale Elementary School itself. On top of that, the location of the school for after school programs and kids being bused there to the school for families for safe pickup and drop off, that would also be appealing for the Y to be in that location as well. So it could provide a lot more in childcare along with the proper spacing.
Rick?
Matt, if you look at the demographics of the area to know whether your membership, most of it comes from south of the river, north of the river, yeah, and also the age breakout.
Sure, so the demographics at the Y, roughly 50% of our membership are seniors. And then the other 50% are families and youth. Youth probably represent about 20% of our membership because most of those youth are merged in with their family membership. The location, people here don't like going from north to south of the river, what I've found. It's kind of like you live on the north side, you live on the south side. And majority of our membership are from people on the south side of the river. We do have a population, but it's a smaller population on the north side.
So have you looked at the general overall pattern of the city to realize, because most of the new construction now is occurring south of the city, and I think if you looked at the age group, I would say the majority of the older people are north of the river. So if you're choosing a facility brand new, you're probably going to stay south of the river because that's where the majority of your young people will be?
Yeah, so looking at here in Grants Pass and the layout of where housing is going to be built in the future, my best guess and assessment of it is all the future building is going to be south of the river because you can't build in the mountains, there isn't water, there's just not much land, flat land to build on. So you're gonna have the Fruitdale area, the Redwood area, and obviously south of there being built towards Cave Junction. And that's where the most population is coming in. That was the same conversation that we had with RCC, why it was appealing for them, is that location and the future buildings of homes in that area. And so the location down there by Allendale Elementary School obviously is a great location because it's not far from the highway, and where the future building of the homes will be is a great place.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Matt.
Again, I appreciate the time today, and any questions, please feel free to email or call me. I'd love to have more conversation.
Thank you. All right, council, normally we'd have a discussion, but unless you have anything burning today, I think maybe we just need to let this idea percolate a little bit.
I have a question.
We don't accept questions from the audience, thank you. Any discussion today? All right, let's just think on this a little bit, keep it in mind. Okay, go ahead.
You know, we have the caveman pool on the agenda, and I passed out the collective statement of the Grants Pass Pool Committee that mentioned both the existing caveman pool and the, Vanessa, I don't think you have one.
I don't have one either.
I think you got one. Maybe.
Nope, I've sorted through everything.
But anyway, I just, they talked about both the Allen Creek location and the caveman pool. There was 17 dots for the existing pool location and 16 dots for the Allen Creek location, so they were pretty close. So what I was thinking is, as we move forward and discuss the caveman pool, that we, at that time, enlarge the discussion. The consensus from the pool committee was to have a bimodal approach, not one or the other, but both, you know, which would require definitely outside funding as we prepare for the future. And whether that's possible or not, I don't know. But I would ask the question. Anyway, you need to pay attention to what the pool committee recommended, because they addressed both locations, and there is some new information in terms of the why moving ahead. The other discussion item I thought of, and it was just history, because it's good to learn from history. The existing Y was built with a lot of county funds. And my understanding was it was a lot of payment to counties from timber revenue, along like with the courthouse and our streets and things like that. So it was a community effort and funding that resulted in the existing Y. And I know when I moved to town, and we moved from a small town, the kids were really excited. They didn't even know an indoor pool existed. So anyway.
Do you mind if I comment on that quick?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. The facility that was currently the Y, when it first started, it was started as a county facility where the county ran it and then had another business come in to run it as an aquatic center. And then they found that it was not sustainable. And then that was when the YMCA took it over. And as the YMCA was trying to run it, that was why we started adding equipment into it back 39 years ago, because it's tough for an aquatic center on its own to be able to run and operate in a positive cash flow. And so that's the importance of being able to add a recreation center or facility type center of the YMCA to an aquatic center. But yes, it actually started out where the county tried to run it on its own and then found that it was losing money pretty detrimental to their funds. So just wanted to throw that in there as well.
Sorry, Sarah, I got one more very quick and pertinent question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Matt, could you tell us approximately what percentage of your clientele are on scholarship or pay nothing to use your facility now?
Best guess, it's tough because the last 2 years has changed, but you're looking at probably a third of the membership is on insurance pay. So the insurance pays for it and they don't have to pay anything. We have probably, I would say 10 to 15% are on full scholarship, or on a scholarship, not full scholarship, but a scholarship of some sort of discount pay. So that would be the rough numbers. It's changed pretty dramatically just over the last couple of years of people coming in and out, and what it was in 19 to what it is now. So that's just rough numbers.
Thanks, Matt. All right, well, the purpose of getting this in front of you all today is just before we actually move forward with the caveman pool, and we haven't really allocated any funding source to that yet, but before we make any big plans, just to decide where we want to go with this proposal as well. So we don't really need to have a major discussion about it today. Just think about it and bring it up again if you're interested. Next up, we have our sheriff, Dave Daniel, here to present an idea about criminal justice funding.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the time. You asked me to come back, and here we are. So, yeah, that's volume level. Now, how are we doing now? There we go.
Great.
Now I can back up from it a little bit. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Sheriff Dave Daniel. You're Josephine County Sheriff, and you're all my bosses. That's how I look at it. I have 86,000 bosses, and it's an honor to be in that position, and so thank you very much. We have a problem in law enforcement, obviously, as you know. That's why I'm here, in part, that we're losing funding. County Sheriff's losing funding. You guys are obviously not quite sustained to the level you'd like to be. So I come with you with a proposal. I'm not married to it, but I haven't gotten any other offers, any other proposals, anything else out there that really I've looked at or we've looked at that is viable. This is kind of really the only egg in the basket right now. So I am absolutely open and willing to sit in on any discussion where there is other options that are brought forward. But for today, I would just like to discuss this potential option with you, and we'll go through that. I previously have provided you a copy of this PowerPoint, so you have that. Also, a draft ordinance that was prepared by County Legal Counsel in assistance with the Oregon Legislative Council. So we made sure that what we were doing was lawful and within what our abilities to do. So really, working together, there's nothing we can't accomplish for the citizens we serve. And I know this from law enforcement. 17 years, I was a police officer and detective for the city of Grants Pass, and it was a fabulous career. And thank you for helping me raise my family and get my 2 young ones out the door. But I've also worked for the state, and now I work for the county. And I can tell you behind the scenes, law enforcement in Josephine County has a great partnership. You have a fantastic chief that has opened doors for us. I have opened doors, and I know the state police has worked well in partnership with both of us, including community corrections, almost to a level that I've never seen before. So I like to look at it, as I look around the room here actually today, I see a city council, I see a mayor, I see some leaders in our faith-based community, I see a couple of county commissioners. So I know this is important to all of us, to work together to find a solution because we can. And in my opinion, I believe we will. It's not a scorecard. Who gets to pound their chest and say, ooh, we did this, you didn't do this, we did this. We're not playing golf here. We just want to come to a resolution that everybody can hopefully be satisfied with. And really, that's the goal, and that's my goal for being here today. So again, I thank you for this opportunity and your willingness to listen to a potential solution. So what do we do? Income tax? Do we do a taxing district, which is a tax on property? Do we do, who knows? But the only one that I've really looked at so far that has the potential, I believe, to, if not solve the problem, at least help solve a problem, is a law enforcement retail activities tax. Now, this tax is a seasonal tax. It goes from April 15th, as you can see on the chart, to October 15th. And we really impact the tourist months of that. See, we have so many visitors that come to Josephine County in the summertime, fishing, hiking, rafting, just to visit our great historic downtown corridor, which I love, by the way. And so keep in mind this is seasonal, at least for now. And also I will add this, none of this is set in stone. There's always wiggle room in any of this for us to make it work. So I always keep that door and window open. Allowable use is basically taxes collected go into a law enforcement trust fund where it's collected by the county tax collector, and the trust fund will only be used for law enforcement purposes. I think in this proposal, we would offer an annual external audit of the funds. It worked very well for our corrections levy that passed, and it was just recently renewed. And it gives that sense of trust, I think, to the citizens that we're doing exactly what we're saying we're going to do, and we're not going to stray from that. Again, up for discussion, a 3% tax applies to the first 2,000 of any purchase. And this is subject to basically an annual adjustment according to the Consumer Price Index. For example, buying $6,000 worth of furniture will only be $60. So you're only taxing up to the first $2,000. And again, that $2,000 number is negotiable, and we can talk about that, whether that needs to be a little bit higher based on the amount of funds we're trying to obtain, or if it's too much. But it cannot be increased without a vote of the people. There has to be very firm on that. We don't want to turn it into California. People are already going, wait a minute, you got a sales tax is what you're talking about there, Sheriff. And yeah, in essence it is. But it's law enforcement retail value added tax is what we're calling it. Again, very important. It can't be increased. We're not going to be at California levels of 10.5 and 11 and then, oh, we need a little more, we need a little more. The people get a say. When the tax expires, it moves, being the months that it's not in place, the winter months, it moves some of the local buying power to when the local merchants really might need not to have that burden alone. And also impact our citizens that live here and are staying here in the winter months and not basically the tourist and the influx of population that we see in the summer. Some of the non-taxable items, unprepared food, prescription medication, internet access, any interest including a fee in real estate or real property, motor vehicle fuel, telephone services, transient lodging, cigarettes and tobacco products, lottery tickets or shares of the Oregon State Lottery, alcohol or liquors, psilocybin products or services, marijuana items addressed by our Josephine County Code in Chapter 3.25. And those things that are not taxable are legally not taxable. The state has pretty much already got their finger on the pulse of those, and they're, you can ask the governor to give it up, but I don't think you're going to get it, but at any rate. Distribution. Incorporated areas of the county will receive basically a share as determined by the percentage of population of Josephine County. And this again is a proposal. So say Josephine County has just over 50%, we would get just over 50% as a county to support our law enforcement services. Grants Pass is about 38% in that ballpark. So they receive 38% of that total lump sum. Cave Junction as well. So I mean, there's a benefit to the municipalities to see a chunk of money and a chunk of funding that is different. Businesses receive a rebate because it's always important. Obviously, we've got to think about the merchants and how is this going to impact them. So 5% of the 3% tax, retail tax, would actually go back and be returned to the merchants to cover them having to get on board and conduct the, and go to the people for the added 3%. So it's not too big of a burden, as big of a burden on them. So it's really the responsibility of the retailer. So the retailer is the one that's going to have to collect this tax and then go through the process of getting a hold of the tax collector and making that lump sum payment. It's based on the taxes due based upon the gross receipts from the retail sales, as I explained. The retailers would need to look at each transaction to determine if it's taxability, if it has taxability. And those are outlined, again, in the ordinance that you've been provided, and it's only about 3 pages. So we're not talking a very long document. I think they should be able to get through that. Taxes due to Josephine County tax collector by March 1st for the prior calendar year is kind of what we're looking at. We thought about going on a quarterly or a trimester basis of making those payments. But when people are filing their corporate tax information to the state, they're not doing that 3-4 times a year to my knowledge. So I think it makes more sense to go one time a year. So kind of look at estimated tax revenue, and this is kind of the lion in the room, or the elephant in the room, either one. Because this has some positives. It has the fact that everybody pays for the services, and that's fantastic. However, it's got some negatives that are kind of questions, and I think those questions need to be answered, or at least investigated or looked at. How much is it? What are we really looking at here to benefit our county and our community? That's a difficult question to answer, and it would probably be a question that would come up right after this presentation and when we get to the question phase. So I can tell you our previous finance director, Arthur O'Hare, he went and looked around at trying to compare is what he did, basically. He took a county out of Warrington and tried to compare house means and medians and to figure out if it was very comparable to Josephine County and City of Grants Pass and Cave Junction. And this is really kind of what he came up with a 3% tax on retail sales. And this is basically based on the population. So it shows here Grants Pass being 4349, and I know that's always ever changing probably, but Cave Junction at 2.35 and Josephine County at 53.16. And then there's kind of the proposed revenue that at least based upon the 2019 study, kind of where we're at. So, but these populations are based on the census of 2020 as far as population is concerned.
Those are the population of people who pay their taxes.
So I don't want to take up a whole bunch of your time.
Please don't make any more outbursts from the audience. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, that's okay, thank you. So that's really kind of where I'm at. You have the nuts and the bolts. The ordinance is there in front of you. I encourage you to take a look at that and at some point and dive into it. Really, again, this is a proposal. I don't, at this point, of all the different tax sources that I've looked at, I don't have right now any other answers for you as to how we can support law enforcement financially and fiscally in the future. This is really kind of it. But I, again, am very willing to entertain any concept. We're coming into a pitfall, and Josephine County Sheriff's Office is in real trouble, real trouble. My commissioners are going to do everything they can and have told me they're going to do everything they can to keep us fiscally stable and sustained for this next year. There are no promises the following year. And we've been there before. I'm sure you all remember that, 2010 when it hit. It was, or 2012, excuse me, when it really hit. And I don't ever want to go back there again. To be honest with you, that's why I ran for sheriff. Part of the solution or part of the problem. And that's where I'm at, trying to be part of the solution if we can again. I will close before the questions in that thank you. I think this council, of all the councils that I've seen over the course of my 28 years in law enforcement, maybe has been having to decide some of the most tough decisions I think I've seen in a long time. And I commend you for your abilities and cooperations and partnerships and working through those. I live here in the city too. I've lived in the county as well, but I live here in the city too right now. And You guys are making it a fantastic place to stay to the best of your abilities. I'll close with that. And are there any questions for me?
Joel?
Well, I had a couple questions. First off, I appreciate your willingness to serve, and I mean,
It's my pleasure, sir.
So, yeah, so thank you for doing that. There's, I used to work for the feds, and the feds, especially out in Illinois Valley, Illinois River, we had funding for county deputies and vehicles. Is that program still ongoing, and is the sheriff's office cooperating in?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that you're aware of.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I could be mistaken.
I think your predecessor ended it for some reason because he didn't want the feds involved, and everybody lost. So that might be a good way to expand that. The other question I had, you said the limitations on expending the revenue was it was going to be strictly for law enforcement.
Yes.
And,
yes.
Is there any more restrictions on it? Is it just for deputies? Is it just for what will be on the ballot, and what are the limitations on how to spend that money for both the county and the city?
And the city. It's a great question, I think there might even be law enforcement defined in this. I think I remember seeing that, but the idea, the concept is just for law enforcement, not public safety services, law enforcement services. Your fire department would be a totally separate ballgame. So really it would be restricted, the revenues would be restricted to Grants Pass police, at least within the city.
So would it be restricted then to operate, can you use the funds to operate the jail and those justice services?
Potentially, yes. Community corrections would not, because they're funded by the state. The DA's office that we all use would be a component of that and used for law enforcement. And then your sheriff's office is really it, and juvenile.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Valerie?
In following up on that, I'm going to ask, so currently we have a levy that pays for jail services. Am I
Yes.
correct? So that, so there was a shift this in previous, it was all kind of lumped, but in the last so many years, the jail services have been, and juvenile services have been kind of, and are covered by I think it's the 93-cent levy, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So it's my understanding then that funding would continue to pay for juvenile and the jail, and what you're actually looking for is the money that's needed for the sheriff deputies?
Yes, it'd be operating expenses, whatever that may be, from you need to buy a vehicle or you need to hire a deputy or an officer for the city.
Okay.
But those are kind of the parameters of where those monies would go. It's very item specific in the form of just law enforcement, and really whatever that means is how you do it. And obviously with an audit, you're going to be held, well, I'm going to be held to that, and the county is going to be held to that standard.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that, and I don't know whether you've gone before Chamber of Commerce or to some of the other places and kind of gotten an idea of where they're standing on that. And
I have not yet, and the reason is you guys are you're pretty powerful, and I wanted to see before I wasted a bunch of other people's times if the city of Grants Pass was even interested in this concept to move forward and maybe do some more investigations, and what your thoughts are. So I really am kind of just going to wait to see what kind of interest we have from you all, and then absolutely I will go beyond that. You know, at the end of the day, it's a law enforcement retail value-added tax, but it's a sales tax, and we know how Oregon in general thinks about that. But here's my problem. What's the other option? Somebody please help me with another option if this isn't it. I haven't heard any. Hope that answers your question, ma'am.
Yeah, it does answer the question. Like I said, I just want to make sure that we are clear exactly, you know, what the money is going to be used for, and, you know, what that, because I do know that there will be questions raised about the jail levy, you know, that still is there, but this is specifically for the deputies and the sheriffs that are out in the field, as I do know they need to be there. I think we all know they need to be there. So what is your timeline when you're talking about when you would need to have the money to know moving forward?
Well, I mean, I think as far as this goes, if it were put on a ballot, it would go either in a special election September, October, or on the November ballot this coming. And so that's the timeline on what we're looking at. Now, you may not receive funds. We may have to find the funds to carry over until the taxes are collected again. So there might be a gap there that we would need to somehow Band-Aid. How we accomplish that on the county side of it, I don't exactly know yet, but I have faith. Thank you.
Vanessa?
Thank you, Sheriff, for coming today, and truly thank you for trying to find a solution to this difficult problem. Do you have any concerns with receiving a majority of your funding through a singular source? We do know in 2020 consumer spending was severely halted. Does that raise any concerns?
Great question, Counselor. It's spot on, and I pretty much expected that one. Yeah, I do. Because at the end of the day, you don't know what the economy is going to do. We all know what's going on in the economy right now. We're slowing, for sure. So we don't exactly know, and that's a little spooky. I'll tell you that, because we don't know from maybe one year to the next how much revenue this is actually going to bring in. But it almost, it's kind of, and to a certain extent, it's a gamble, to answer your question. I think you know that. And so we wouldn't know until year 1 or year 2 or year 3, basically what our baseline is. But, so good question. Something to think about.
Thank you.
Joel?
So then, to be whole, you're going to need the sales tax and the levy. Is that correct? The sales tax will not replace the levy. We would implement the sales tax, and then next year that we would still be voting on the levy. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Not next year. We just renewed the jail corrections levy and juvenile detention levy for another 5 years, so you're not going to see that for 5 years. But yes, I have 2 different funds. That is a totally separate fund, and that was as a result of the passage of that levy back in 15, I think it was, but it was, 17, excuse me. So this is a totally separate operating fund for me. It could be something different for your chief and his staff to see how they wanted, what they needed those monies for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Brian, then Rick?
Yeah, thank you for being here, Sheriff.
Thank you.
So in this particular scenario you presented, it's showing approximately 4.4 million going to the county. And I know that that's just a rough estimate. Can you quantify what that $4.4 million would essentially be getting us? Like,
what kind of services would that provide to
like
our community?
How many people, patrol, like what does that money get us?
Yeah, that should put me up to 24/7 with a full staffed patrol division. And keep in mind, some of those monies would go to the DA's office as well. Because obviously if we're ramped up with a full detectives division, which we would go to, which right now we have 2, I would be looking at 4 to 5. And then I would ramp up probably another, it would put me up about another 12 to 15 deputies at the tune of about $130,000 for each one. So
12 to 15 in addition to what's current?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, but 24/7, obviously most important. That's one of my goals, and I'm still, still after it.
Rick?
Thank you, Sheriff. Do you have a breakdown when you talk about the percentages up there and the income coming in? Would the majority of that income be generated from within the city limits, or do you have any perspective? And then, of course, if the majority of the income is still generated by the city, then proportionally the county gets more, as shown there?
Well, yes, to answer your question, I think most of the commerce has taken place inside the city limits. I think that's obvious. And yes, but it goes, I fall back on, Councilor Recker, I fall back on the fact that, again, it's not a us, them, you, us. And we have a tendency to always fall back on that. It's not. My partners in law enforcement don't look at it that way. And so I hope to, with all the people in the faith-based community in the room, the leaders and our commissioners and you all, we look at this globally. Because I know the impacts of what happens when there are no deputies in the field. I've lived it. I've blood, sweat, and tears. And it doesn't work if we're not both whole.
Well, thank you. I think teamwork is very important.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions?
Thank you.
All right.
And Mayor, I offer, if anytime you want me back, just reach out, please.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, council, do you want to discuss this now, or do you want to wait until after our permanent funding presentation? Go ahead, Vanessa.
Yeah, I had a request for additional data, and I was told that this request would have to come from council. It's pretty intensive. As proposed, unfortunately, this proposal is $900,000 short for our current levels of service. That doesn't consider any future growth for Grants Pass Police Division. So I was curious to see, under a couple different scenarios, potentially an all-year an all-year sales tax at 1% and a seasonal at 2%. The amount of revenue raised under an all-year tax at 1.5% and a seasonal at 3%. And then I was curious to see the amount of revenue raised with a spending cap from 3,000 to 9,000. It is, correct, yeah, it's at 2,000 right now.
Okay, so you were wanting city staff to crunch those numbers?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Council, is there interest in that? Rick says yes. Valerie says yes, Kurt says yes. Okay.
Can I maybe provide a suggestion? It will be difficult for us and even more work if we try to coordinate where the sheriff has gotten their numbers. We have not had any partnership with that. If council's interested in implementing a sales tax from a city's perspective, we can look at our numbers and start fresh, and it's going to take a lot of time, staff time, to do that. When we originally did it, it took quite a while, and we can definitely do that. But it is an effort that if council needs that information to make an informed decision, we'll be more than happy to do it. If council's looking at wanting sales tax information pertaining to the sheriff's proposal, it may be more appropriate to make the request from the sheriff to get those numbers for you in relation to their proposal. That would be just my one point I wanted to make.
I have attempted that avenue with no success.
Rick?
I guess I could see if there's the sheriff, if you could take the existing figures you have at this time and just do an interpolation. In other words, at this point, we're looking for ballparks anyhow, so if you already had your original figures, can you come up with some new figures? Thank you.
Did you want to respond to that? Brian?
I think I would prefer to hear the next presentation before I would want to commit to having a lot of staff time spent on that. Let's just see how the next presentation plays out.
Okay, we'll keep your idea in mind. All right, anything further on this before we move on? Okay, let's get that presentation on the permanent funding for our public safety department, and we will keep the sheriff's proposal in mind. Let's see how that plays out. Are we going to have Adam on the phone? Is that how we're doing it today? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break while Karen gets everything set up, and we'll just reconvene at 12:55 on my clock. All right, welcome back. We are back on the air, and Adam, are you there?
I am there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Wonderful. So, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I have a presentation today for you as a continuation of permanent funding for public safety services, which includes fire, police support, crisis support, and the Sobering Center. The subject and summary of today's presentation will be to review the increased demand on general support,
Hang on just a second, Adam. The audio is a little funny. Does it seem odd to you guys? A little underwater? Do we know how to fix that?
His connection.
Okay.
Adam, you're a little underwater sounding.
Let's see what I can do. It also sounds like I might be getting a little bit of reverb. Not sure if there's another mic turned on in the room that is picking up my voice from the speaker.
Okay, continue and we'll see if it's a little better.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Right, so the subject and summary for today's presentation is to review the increased demand for general support, review the public safety gap funding, including the increased revenues identified, as well as some efficiencies and service level adjustments that were made last year. We'll then review some funding mechanisms of other municipalities, and then conclude with a very brief summary of the funding options that we've discussed so far. Of course, the relationship to council goals is to enhance community safety, with the #1 goal in 2022 of providing permanent funding for public safety services. Related directly to public safety, I have some charts here to demonstrate the increased demand on general support. The charts on the left are budgeted numbers. The charts on the right are actual numbers. Those on the top are based on dollar amounts, and the bottom are based on percentages. And what these demonstrate is that according to the budget, you can see the general support that was required by public safety. Now you'll see a very large difference between what was budgeted and the actual general support required, and that is because we budget based on conservative revenue estimates, as well as budgeting for full employment and essentially the worst case scenario of expenditures. So that's why our actuals end up better than our budget numbers. However, the important thing to take away from these charts is the trend from 2016 to 2020. You'll see every year there was an increased use of general support by public safety until 2021, and I will talk a little bit about that in just a second. So the last slide was specifically related to public safety use of general support, but then the question next can flow to, of all of the general support that we have, where is that going? So the top section is the budgeted distribution of general support, and the bottom section is the actuals. Now, the departments in the general fund that you do not see here are building and tourism, and that is because they have their own restricted resources and do not generally use general support. They can, if needed, but they have historically not needed to. So if I could draw your attention to the public safety line of the budget, you'll see that the percentage was increasing from 37% to 40% to 49%. And the general ops distribution of general support was decreasing each year. Then when we turn over to the actuals, public safety went from 24% to 34%, and then down to 24% in 2021. And I believe that that was the result of two main factors, which one being the failure of the levy in November of 2020 brought a lot of uncertainty to how the city was going to proceed with public safety services, as well as the early adoption of several of the service level adjustments that I'll talk about in just a second. And the result of the increased use, or the changes in the use of general support, is that general operations within the general fund, which is basically additional use of discretionary dollars, then had less available which in the past has been used for capital projects and contributions towards other items council would be interested in. So the change in the demand on general support was very much, or is very much, impacted by the assessed values and the growth of property tax revenue within the city. As we discussed in the past, the expenditures have been increasing at a faster rate than the revenues have been increasing, which is why we had to identify that gap in funding. Now, according to Oregon revised statutes, assessed values can increase up to 3% on existing properties. In the last 11 years, the average annual growth has been about 3.56%. However, that includes new construction. And to look specifically at fiscal year 2021, the total assessed value increase was 3.19%, but that was made up of 1.6% from existing properties and about another 1.6% from new construction. So what that tells us is that the existing properties were not increasing our revenues by 3%. They were only increasing by 1.6%. And then the new construction, of course, is often accompanied by an increased demand for services. Another important factor that's impacting our property taxes is the Urban Renewal Agency. Now, the City of Grants Pass is one of the impacted taxing districts, as the Urban Renewal Agency takes up about 18% of the city's land area. And it impacts the city because any assessed value increases over the frozen base from 2018 actually become revenue of the Urban Renewal Agency and not of the City of Grants Pass. So another way to look at that is, of the percentages that you see above, the total is 3.19%. For any increased assessed values of existing properties, that went to the URA. So the city wasn't even receiving an additional 1.6% of revenue. It was even less than that. And depending on where the new construction was, if it was in the Urban Renewal Agency, that went to the URA and not to the city. So the city's portion of the total property taxes is certainly not increasing at the same rate as expenditures are. Now, speaking of expenditures, one of the items that has made increased expenditures such a challenge for the city and throughout the state of Oregon is increased rates from the Public Employee Retirement System, or PERS. And now, I'll try and summarize all of the numbers below, basically in that PERS is based on a percentage of salaries. So as salaries increased with a cost of living increase, for example, of 3%, when the PERS rate also increases, it's essentially a higher rate on a higher salary, which turns a 3% cost of living increase into a 4.5 or 4.8% total cost increase for the city of Grants Pass. Now, last year we had the public safety funding gap exercise, which is a gap of anywhere between $1 and $2 million. In that exercise, we did identify around $430,000 new revenues, including increasing the lodging tax from 9% to 12%, increasing planning fees, business taxes, and also there was the addition of a false alarm fee, which may not materialize as dependable annual revenue, but what it will do, we believe, is be able to increase our efficiency by incentivizing property owners to make sure that their alarm systems are working properly and thereby reducing the amount of false alarm responses. Moving on to service level adjustments, those made specifically within parks total about $250,000, including extended vehicle replacement, freezing a municipal service worker, reductions to parking lot sweeping, and the biggest portion being from not adding an additional 2 parks maintenance FTE, which would have been needed with the addition or expansion of city parks, and thereby needing more maintenance. Within community development, service levels adjustments of about $75,000 were identified, including restructuring the Welcome Center and reducing temporary personnel. The next category is within internal service funds, and you'll see 2 numbers here because the general fund supports about 60% of the internal service funds. So the internal service funds identified $203,000 of expenditure reductions through service level adjustments, which benefited the general fund, which is where the savings were absolutely needed, of $122,000. And the dollar amounts listed with each of these items are the general fund savings. So each of these items actually saved the internal service funds about an additional 40%. That included freezing of the land acquisition specialist, reducing travel and training, the GP Now newsletter, freezing a part-time personnel technician, reduction of paid projects, reduction of council memberships and training, as well as reduced consulting for salary surveys. And finally, specifically related to public safety, service level adjustments with savings of around $906,000, including extended vehicle replacement, public safety operating cost reductions, freezing an officer position, freezing a record specialist, making changes to downtown parking enforcement, which of course there have been some recent changes to, extending fire computer replacement, reducing police response to certain calls, which included a second frozen police officer, reductions to student firefighter program, cadet program, and dispatch services for a total amount identified of around $1.78 million. Taking a look at some of our neighbors and some of the other funding mechanisms that are used to support public safety and the general fund. The cities I was able to do some research on and get some feedback on were Redmond, Washington County, Newport, Warrenton, Ashland, and then I'll have a brief slide on other cities that actually use a sales tax besides Ashland. The city of Redmond has a population of $31,000. Their property tax rate total is $4.41 per thousand. And in their case, this is actually brings in more revenue than is required to fund just their police force. Now, the next second bullet you'll see there is permanent rate limit of 6.16, which is much higher than the city, and I'll get to that in just a second. Redmond also has a fire district with a property tax rate of 2.0242, which is a combination of their permanent rate as well as an additional operating levy. Now, I believe what happened is the fire district was formed about 10 years ago, where they split off the $4.41 for the city and set aside the 1.75 for the fire district. Those two amounts together equal the permanent rate limit of the city of 6.16. So I believe that's what happened 10 years ago. And then comparing that to the city of Grants Pass, their population is about 80% of ours. Their assessed value per person is quite close to ours, and that's an important metric that I can explain more in just a second. However, their total tax rate is 56% higher than the city of Grants Pass. So they're bringing in a larger proportionate share of property taxes based on their tax rate. To go to the far end of the spectrum of entities that we looked at, the population of Washington County is 620,000. Their total tax rate is 4.0384, but they're looking to increase that in May of 2022. There are county property taxes, which are comprised of a permanent tax rate as well as a 5-year local option levy. So total county property taxes of 2.7. They also have an enhanced sheriff's patrol district with a permanent tax of 64 cents per thousand, as well as an additional 5-year local option levy of 68, which they're trying to increase in May of 2022. I did not spend a great deal of time trying to compare those to the city of Grants Pass, as the population is so dissimilar and the services that they provide to their citizens are quite dissimilar from the city as well. The city of Newport, who has a population of around 11,000, they have a council goal to increase their lodging tax rate from 9.5% to 12%. The city has the 12%. In 2021, voters turned down a 5% sales tax on restaurants, with 32 saying yes, 68 saying no. The intent of this sales tax would be to add police and library employees, as well as to fund repairs to city buildings and parks. They also have property tax rate of 5.59 per thousand. And then in comparing the city of Newport to Grants Pass, their population is only 28% of ours. However, their assessed value per person is 46% higher than the city of Grants Pass. And in addition to that, their tax rate is also 35% higher. And I put it together this way to demonstrate that they have a higher tax rate on a higher tax base, is how they're able to fund their public safety. And even if with that, they've had to make changes like you see with the lodging tax and also putting that sales tax to the voters. Moving on to the city of Warrington with a population of 6,000, there is a Warrington Rural Fire District. As this entire community is fairly small, I was unable to get some detailed information on where that fire district gets its funding from. But in addition to that fire district, they also have property taxes, which include a permanent rate and a local option rate. And compared to the city, they are 15% of our population, but their assessed value per person is 21% higher than ours. But then their tax rate is lower than ours. And I believe that they're able to fund their operations with that lower rate because their assessed value per person is higher. Finally, the city of Ashland, with a population of around 22,000, they have had a food and beverage tax since 1993 of 5%. And just to give you kind of a brief history, first starting off that tax will be reconsidered by the voters in 2030. But in 1993, the allocation of that tax was 20% to parks and 80% to their wastewater treatment plant to pay off some debt. In 2009, they set aside 2% for administration of collections. I believe probably worked very similar to our lodging tax, and that first they take the administration fee, and then the remainder followed the same 20-80 split that was established before. Then in 2016, that was changed to 25% to parks, 75% to the wastewater treatment plant. And in 2021, I've got a question mark at the end because it appears they're considering several options at the moment. Or at least were according to their fiscal 22 budget, including allocating all of this tax to the wastewater treatment plant to go ahead and pay off the debt and reduce interest costs. And then after that, a distribution between streets and parks, or all of it to parks. So I don't have the final answer on that, but they've certainly made changes over the years. The city of Ashland also has a utility user tax, which is 25% on every electric meter. That becomes general support revenue. They also have a public safety support fee of $1.50 per month on each electric meter. And they also have an Ashland Forestry Resiliency, or AFR, charge, which is a fixed amount based on water meter size. So that's attached to their utility bills. Moving on to their property taxes. Their property taxes include a permanent rate as well as a local option, which was established to fund their fire station number 2. I also read in their documents that they're considering feasibility studies on a regional parks and recreation district or a parks operating levy, as well as regional fire and ambulance district or additional changes to public safety operating levy. Then in comparison to the city of Grants Pass, their population is 56% of ours, but their assessed value per person is 48% higher than ours, and their property tax rate is 5% higher than ours as well. And then finally, just to provide some additional sales tax information, I was able to find that the city of Cannon Beach has a 5% sales tax on restaurants, the purpose of which was to fund the Cannon Beach Rural Protection District, as well as a new city hall and police station, and it passed 52 to 48. There is also the city of Ymca, and I apologize, I suspect I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but they've had a 5% sales tax on food and beverages since 2006. So those two and the city of Ashland are the only 3 entities in the state with that type of sales tax. I also did some research with the League of Organized Cities to see what other types of fees were attached to utility bills. A study, I believe it's from 2019, provided the list below. It did not include the specific municipalities that were charging these fees on their utility fees. So I'd have to do some more research to try and identify exactly who those were. But you'll notice second from the bottom on the left column is a fire flow charge. And then third from the bottom on the right column is a public safety fee charge, as well as several others here on this list. And then finally, to do a very simple and short review of the revenue options that we have discussed so far. On February 14th, staff presented a temporary levy or changes to a temporary levy, service districts, sales taxes, utility fees, and payroll taxes. The call to action is, of course, at council's discretion, but ultimately we will need some direction on which of the funding options you would like us to pursue or continue searching for other options. And with that, I can take any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Council, do you have questions? Rob?
Yeah, I have a few questions, Adam. Could you go back to slide number 3, please? Yeah, so on the right-hand side, it appears as if 2015 or so, that actually the amount needed by public safety is actually a negative number. Could you explain that, please?
That's correct. In both 2015 and 2016, public safety actually returned general support to the general fund. So of all of its resources, they ended up not needing all of those in those particular years.
Do we have any insight as to how that came about or why that was?
I do not have the specific reasons that expenditures were as low as they were that year or revenues were potentially higher that year. I could certainly find that out, but I don't have that today.
Rick?
Rob, I think in that year we had 5 positions unfulfilled in the public safety, and I think that could have been one of the reasons why there was a surplus.
Is that also when the utility fee was
On there, we had a jail.
helping out at all? No? All right, other questions? Rob, go ahead.
So, Adam, could you go to slide 12, please? So in Redmond, am I understanding this correctly, that I guess for fire district, they had a permanent rate on a fire district. Is that slide 10? Yeah. And then it appears as if they also needed a levy on top of that, or maybe at a different time. Do they now have a permanent rate from a district and then also a levy?
That's correct.
So did those
I did not
happen?
get the information on when that operating levy was first passed, but 10 years ago is when they got their permanent rate, and now they currently have an additional operating levy, yes, sir.
Yeah. And I guess there was at least 1 or 2 other cities that seemed to have some kind of permanent district and also a levy as well. I think slide 13.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a question. Not exactly regarding this specific thing, but in terms of the cap on the permanent property taxes that I think was established by voters quite a long time ago, is there any way for that to be changed? It's not allowable by vote of the public. Aaron is shaking his head at me. It is stuck.
It is not allowable by a vote of the public, and that's why districts have become more popular in the state of Oregon, whether it be a parks district or a fire district or whatever. It's an alternative mechanism of of changing the permanent property tax rate. And until tax reform at the state level is accomplished, if it ever is, then the tax rate that we have established for Measure 5, 47 and 50 is what we have.
Okay, absolutely. Actually, I was asking at the state level, it seems to me with both, you know, the county's issues and the city's issue, that these counties and cities that have established lower property tax rates, you know, obviously some of these cities have a much more generous amount. And so it would be in our interest to not be locked in forever to rates from 30 years ago. Valerie?
Yeah, I just had a question on the capping as well, because I know they also capped to where so some communities actually go into compaction. So I'm just kind of trying to remember what that cap was that you could have as a permanent.
It's $10 per thousand, and then there's a $15 per thousand when you put in all of the taxing districts, but for like the municipal services and those type of permanent property tax rates, it's $10 per thousand.
Okay, so basically, and I just want to clarify, so it's 15 includes school district as well, correct? So 10 is kind of municipal and $5 is basically the school district. Okay, thank you. So right now, we're sitting at our $4 and whatever, and then our $1.79. Does that also include county taxes as well, right? Because we always talk about our city taxes, but we always don't need to remember that people in the city pay city taxes as well as county taxes. So we pay their permanent rate as well as their levy on top of what we pay for the city. So, thank you.
Are there other questions? Go ahead, Val.
I was just going to ask about, is it Eugene that put in the payroll tax? How long has that been?
That's correct.
How long has that been going, or is that just recent?
I believe that was 2021.
Okay, so we don't really know how much they've been able to collect from that. Is that known information?
They do.
I believe I'd probably be able to get to a number, but how that same setup would relate to the city of Grants Pass, we would have to do some serious calculations to be able to identify how that would benefit us.
And was that through a vote? Did they have to get a vote to do that? To increase payroll taxes?
I don't believe it was. I would want to confirm that for certain.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they went to, I don't know how they enacted that. We'd have to take a look at it.
All right, any further questions today? All right, council, did you want to have a discussion about this? Rob, go ahead.
So Joel brought up a point at our last meeting, and he asked Adam a question. Joel, did you ever get an answer, or is Adam prepared to talk about that today? Or because this specifically referred to funding mechanisms.
Right.
But I don't see it on our presentation.
So when we look at the fees added to the water bill, there are different options in adding those fees. You could add it as a constant fee, I think, Adam, or you could add it based on the amount of water used or the size of the meter. Could you extrapolate on that? Is that what you're talking about, Rob?
What I was referring to is how the idea you had about leveraging ARPA money.
Okay.
And you asked him a question about that, I thought.
Okay.
And
Okay. Yeah.
We don't have an answer yet.
Yeah, and I don't think you have an answer yet, Adam. But what Rob's referring to is if we made an investment in our water treatment plant with the ARPA money, that it replaces or reduces people's water bill because of the need to not borrow additional money with additional fees. And then the water bill would actually go down. And depending on the amount of money, it may even go down below what it is today, but we don't know that. We've also are applying for some grants that will bring the water bill down. And so I was talking with Rob, and then we brought it up at the last meeting, and my wife told me I wasn't very clear, so I'm going to try to make it clearer. If we can reduce the water bill below the existing level through grants and investment by ARPA funds, and replace it with a fee for public services that doesn't increase the water bill, that would be an attractive option, which would essentially use the ARPA funds and the grants to fund public safety.
Yeah, so I don't have a specific number for you. What I can tell you is that we could contribute every last cent of ARPA to the water treatment plant, and that would not reduce the rates enough to be able to completely replace the current public safety levy with a fee. That would not be enough. However, any contribution, any external funding sources, including ARPA, including those grants, absolutely gives us more flexibility to be able to consider something like that. And as the presentation from February 14th, I believe includes, is that a utility fee, because there are entities that cannot pay property tax, utility fees are collected from a wider range of customers, and therefore a similar monthly burden on a ratepayer would actually provide the city more revenue that property taxes do. So, like I said, I don't have the specific number, but any contribution towards reducing the water treatment plant debt will be a benefit to the water rate that we will need to charge to our customers.
I think to respond to your rate and what the impact would be and what kind of buffer we would have to be able to reduce the water rate, and then maybe add some kind of utility service fee associated with a public safety activity, would probably be better provide you information in July, August, when we have a response on what kind of funding package we're getting for water treatment plant. Once we have that and we know what packages we have, we can then immediately put into the concept of, if you do this with your ARPA dollars, it can reduce the rate by this. At this moment, we don't really have the numbers to be able to provide you with an idea of how you can reduce how much you could reduce the water rate.
So if I can restate what you said was, we have incomplete information now on the water bill because we don't know what grants we have received. And once we know what grants we have received and the impact that would have on the water bills, then we can make a more accurate assessment of the use of ARPA funds as investment in the water treatment plant. And we won't have that information on those grants until...
I think it was July, August-ish is when we're looking at getting a response back from some of those larger
July or
applications.
August. Okay. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify on that, we have until December to figure out how to spend, to prioritize those ARPA funds, correct?
December 24. So
Okay.
yeah, it's in July 24.
July, okay.
So you've got a lot of time. So if you were to postpone major decisions on ARPA dollars until mid to late summer, and we get that information back, if that provides you with the ability to make an informed decision on where to put some of that, then that might be a prudent thing to do.
Thank you. Rob?
So Adam, question. So is it safe to say that the larger or the more grants that we get towards the water treatment plant, the less we have to borrow, less interest we have to pay? So basically that means that the lower the savings would be if we were to apply some ARPA money to that. Is that, in other words, the better we do on the grants, the less benefit we might get by paying down some of the debt early. Is that accurate?
It would be a larger proportional benefit, that is correct. I'm sorry, a smaller proportional benefit.
Well, and then Adam, though it would be smaller because the awards or the grants would lower the water bill by themselves. So that would be an effect. So you would still have the water bill going down, it would just be for a different purpose.
That's correct.
Rob?
So I guess in summary then, Joel, if I have this right, in summary, if the council were to, one way or another, either through the leveraging ARPA or through grants that the staff would essentially attain, then we could potentially have a lower water bill. We wouldn't, if we didn't, we'd have a savings there that we could then apply to potentially public safety without having to ask the public to reach into their pocket. So out of pocket for public, household bills would be the same, taxes would be the same, and we would end up with potentially more money for public safety if we chose to spend it that way.
Well, and the nonprofits would pay their share because they pay the water bill, but they don't pay property tax.
Thank you.
I think this is a clever idea. However, it would put all of our funding towards, all of our ARPA funding towards public safety, potentially rather than affordable housing, which is something that the council has showed a strong interest in supporting with these dollars and was indicated on the public survey. So.
No, that's, I never said that. I don't think Joel ever said that. What I would be looking for, but we can't get it, I guess, until July, is what Aaron said, is to just take a look at if we were to invest $1 million more, what does that get us? In other words, if we wanted to, I would never, if let's just say we needed, the last time we had a levy, if we actually needed 20 cents or 30 cents more per thousand than we actually went after, in other words, if we needed $1.99 or $2.09, how much of the ARPA money might we have to invest to be able to get the equivalent of a 10 or 20 or 30 cent levy? So if it's $9 million, that's the answer, then we have to decide, do we want to spend the $9 million? But maybe it's $1 million, $2 million, I'm not sure what it is. But we need to look at those figures so we can make an informed decision.
And if we're real successful in grants, maybe it's none of it. We don't know.
And would it also commit a permanent utility fee going towards public safety rather than a short-term or at least a temporary long-term fee paying for the water treatment plant?
No, there's no tit for tat or a nexus between the funding for the water treatment plant. That's a given. So this would be a fee on top of that, but the water treatment plant fee would be lower because of the grants and possibly ARPA. But we don't know that yet till we get the additional information in July.
But in essence, it would be a permanent utility fee going towards public safety, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, it's another ongoing problem we need to solve. Did anyone want to talk about the sheriff's proposal at this time, or still just letting that one simmer a little? Brian, or go ahead then, Rob.
Not specifically on the sheriff's proposal, but just as discussion for this topic. I really hope there is some discussion because, you know, we've had another presentation on it now. So the last one, nothing came out of it and we were just left to kind of rattle around with it. So I hope, you know, there's some sort of vague progress that comes out of this today.
Rob?
So just for council to keep in mind, And I said this at another meeting, but just to be clear, so when you have quote-unquote permanent taxing districts, whether they be fire or public safety or whatever, I made the point before, and it was borne out today in our presentation, that just because a town has a quote-unquote taxing district doesn't mean they don't come back with levies later. So that's not a permanent solution. These taxing districts, and we had at least 2 examples today where that's true. They started out with $1.75 in a taxing district, and they ended up having to come back for a levy in less than 10 years. And so I don't ever want anyone to really portray these districts as being a permanent solution, because they're not.
Joel.
I just wanted to add a short comment. The other thing is, if you put it on the utility bill for good, bad, or ugly, then it replaces the levy, and the levy goes away and property tax goes down. So it's in terms of, I would see my property tax go down, and I would pay for it then through the fee on my water bill, but my property tax would go down.
Any other comments today? All right, just to respond to Brian, we do, we're in a learning phase here, so I guess this just needs to percolate a little bit, and it'll be an ongoing discussion, at least for a little while. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll say my piece now. I know this is unpopular with a lot of people, but sales tax is, I don't think that a sales tax can win. I think the people in our community are used to levies. I think they understand the levy system. They like the levy system. They like the fact that we need to go back to them and get their approval. They like the fact that it is a check and a balance. They like the fact that it holds us accountable. I know that a lot of us in the room don't like that it's temporary. However, it has worked for a very long time, and it can continue to work. So I'll just leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Vanessa.
I appreciate that insight. On the other side of the coin, to represent the first responders of our community, it's a point of serious insecurity, unfortunately. They have families and mortgages, and maybe they're renters, and to think that you could potentially be unemployed in 3 to 5 years, it's driving them away from this community. So we are training them, and we are building them into the professionals that they are, and then they're going to Medford or Ashland or Klamath Falls, unfortunately. So this levy system does affect succession and staffing and recruitment efforts in our community. So I would like to see the council continue to move forward in some sort of fashion towards permanent funding. I think Councillor Pell does make a really good point that under the taxing restrictions from the legislator, specifically Measure 50, the permanent taxing rates, cities are outgrowing them. So I would like to learn more about the potential for the utility fee. I think it would help circumvent the 18% of the tax base in the community under the URA that is currently not paying for public safety services, as well as the nonprofits that are additionally not paying.
DJ, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think we're still a ways away from a reasonable solution. I do appreciate the sheriff's ideas presented today. We have heard the argument for a sales tax. We have heard the argument for utility hikes. We've tried districts. We've tried increasing the levy. I am still not entirely comfortable with a high-handed move such as just implementing a sales or payroll tax or a utility bill increase. We considered this in my first year as a city councilor. Okay, well, if they don't approve, if the constituents don't approve an increase in the levy, the immediate thing was, okay, well, let's just put it on the utility bill, or let's put in a sales tax. And that like I said, that seems high-handed to me in that if we ask the constituents for a levy and they say no, and then we just go ahead and instill some other method or tax or utility hike, it's basically telling them we're going to do it anyway. So I just wanted to let the room know that I'm highly conscious about the constituents' role in a funding source for public safety, because really it ultimately comes down to their decision. Something the sheriff said was, let's do this taxing district, and we can't increase it unless the constituents say yes. Well, I think that's step two. Step one is, would the constituents agree to such a proposal? So just wanted to throw out there. Thank you.
Rob.
Yeah, thanks, DJ. When I step down at the dais as just a tax-paying resident of Grants Pass, I might be pretty impressed if my city council were to find a creative way to increase some public safety funding, some needed funding, and not ask me for more money out of my pocket. And yes, in fact, if we, follow the trail of the money, and it's using it might be potentially using some of the ARPA money or even some grant money to get us to that point. As a tax-paying resident, I'd be somewhat impressed that we got more money for needed public safety services and I didn't have to pay any more out of pocket. So I understand there's other opportunities that would be lost because we could have spent money elsewhere, but I'd be pretty okay as a tax-paying citizen with the fiscal responsibility and the creativity of my council. The other thing I'd like to add is on a sales tax. Of course, they can't be increased without a vote of the people. I've lived in 2 states where sales tax where we had 0 and we went to something which of course went to 4 to 5 times more in a number of years. So and whether or not, the public would okay a sales tax or whether or not the council supports putting it on the ballot, those are all separate questions. But what is in my opinion, in the same way that a permanent taxing district is not a permanent solution, cities will come back for a levy. A sales tax will never, ever stay the same. What will happen is in some number of years, whether that's 3 or 5 or 10, I would bet my paid off mortgage on it. What happens is that they come back, whether city council or county commissioners come back and say, we can keep that sales tax exactly where you want it, but we're going to have to cut services. We will not be able to maintain the same services for that sales tax, so you don't have to vote for an increase, but we will cut services if you do not vote for the increase, and that's what will happen with a sales tax at some point.
Valerie?
Well, the reality it is, and especially if you look at the inflation right now, costs are going up. So nothing can ever be permanent. I mean, that's just kind of the reality. It's just kind of like the PERS. I hope the PERS thing is somehow solved or is going to get better, but look where it's been. If you look at the cost of PERS and, you want to employ people and they want to make enough money to live on, and, so the reality of it is that, yeah, costs will always go up and we'll always have to make adjustments somehow. But I would like to see somewhat diversification, because I think our problem right now is that we have so much tied up in one thing or the other. I've always been a believer, because I do believe a sales tax is, people come into our community all the time, as it is right now, and they don't pay for those services. So, no different than a water fee gets people that the permanent tax doesn't. Sales tax gets people coming into our community that get services but don't pay for services. So I really like the idea of diversification. I also know for a fact that our county, I do not want to go back to 2012. I do not want to go back to where we were. And right now, with the problems that we have in our county with illegal marijuana and some of the issues that have come about, I can't even imagine where we'll be if we don't find some means by which to have sheriff patrols. So, you know, I'm open to about anything. I just think that what we need to do is get out into the community to talk about it and bring in community members and bring in other people, because we are in a crisis with the county being in a crisis. And I love the idea of using ARPA funds, and I love the idea of being creative. I really do. And I think, you know, that's, you know, utilizing the money that's come down for something like that, I think will be fantastic if we can get it to work. But I also look at where we're at and what will happen if something doesn't happen with the patrols down the road. So I like Brian said, I hate to keep kicking this around because the truth of the matter is we need to get out to people and let them know what's going to come crashing down if something isn't put in place. I wish I had an answer. I look forward to hearing in July and August and looking forward to being able to do that. But in the meantime, I think looking at something like and helping the county, and that would help us as well, I think that's something we need to really look at.
Brian, then Vanessa.
So I've heard a few counselors talk about using ARPA money as part of this solution, and I just want to make sure everyone remembers that we sent out a survey to the public, and the public told us, you know, affordable housing, homelessness, water infrastructure. And so and public safety was not even anywhere close to the top of that list. I don't even know if it was on the list. But to try to institute a scheme where you are putting the money towards water infrastructure to backfill public safety is disingenuous, and it is not the intent of those ARPA funds. So the ARPA funds are a one-time opportunity for us to really make a big dent in the housing and homeless issues. And if we are going to squander that away on this instead of that, I don't think the public's going to be very happy with us.
Vanessa.
I feel torn on that as well. I do want a majority of the ARPA funds that we have left. I would like to see them spent on affordable housing and issues of homelessness. So as was stated earlier, you know, if it was $1 million, I think I could get behind that. If it was a small percentage of what is left, I could support that. But I would not support using all of the remaining funds. And Councilor Lovelace also brought up the support of diversification, and that was in our previous presentation from Adam. He did provide 3 separate scenarios of diversification, and a sales tax was considered in one of those. So my request still stands if anyone else would like to support it, to see what revenue could be raised under at least a 1% sales tax, not with the intention to fully fund our police division, but with the intention to spread out the cost of it in a myriad of ways to raise the funds.
Rick, and then Rob.
I agree with you. We have to need to look at all aspects of what's available out there to come up with a solution. And come up with a solution is not going to be easy. One alternative is, if I had the magic wand, would be to increase our value in the community through new jobs and new businesses. And that in itself, I think, would be a real shot in the arm, increasing revenues. So if we had a way of increasing our economic force, which includes people, includes buildings and businesses, we would have increased revenues, and I think that could help respond to our demands for the future. So I think it's important that we as a city grow. Not that it's an easy thing to have happen, but I think maybe that aspect could be looked at as well. Thank you.
Rob, then Joel.
Yeah. So I understand Brian's concern with essentially backfilling public safety with money that the public may want to see for homeless issues. I also wonder if on that survey, if public safety was even on that survey. I don't remember that it was, or if that, you know, people at that time when they took the survey probably thought that everything was fine with public safety. You know, they passed a levy, everything's fine, there's no more need for additional funds. So that discussion, I don't believe, was really had with the public, quite frankly. I think it's disingenuous to think that the public was even brought in on that discussion. But because I don't know that it was on the survey, and I don't know that it was explained well if it was on the survey. But beyond that, if we were to get the grants, which it sounded like we are that we would fit the criteria for those grants, it would seem to me that would be a really, really positive thing with regards to us being able to decide where to allocate the money that we would save on the interest for the water treatment plant. But that unfortunately doesn't help, I don't believe, that helps the county at all, which is unfortunate. I don't know how that can be dovetailed into that situation. But one other thing I'd like to add, there's a lot I could discuss about sales tax and everything else, but one thing that I can remember from the last time we had sales tax discussions in 15, Lily Morgan made the point from the dais that she remembered, as a kid, I forget where she lived at the time, but people, making their monthly trip to Costco, et cetera, it's human nature to buy someplace other than where there's a sales tax. Costco's even closer to Grants Pass now. There's tons of people who go once a month. But what we learned last week here in the Soreti presentation was that roughly 4,000 people a day from Josephine County already drive to Medford, which would be the tax-free zone. So it's not like people would have to fire up their car and spending extra gas to get there. There's already 4,000 people a day that are doing it. So even more reason that it would be really tempting for them to buy when they're over there. So there's a lot more discussion about a sales tax would have to happen. I wish there was some other way for us to help the county. I haven't heard it yet.
Joel, then Brian.
Well, I was just trying to wrap it up and kind of give staff some direction for our next presentation. A lot of good discussion, a lot of different opinions, and what I heard was some folks were interested in a sales tax, some folks weren't. So perhaps staff could come back to us with a sales tax for discussion, and we could talk about it. Doesn't mean we're going to implement it, but it's a possibility. The other thing I heard was utility fees, and there was some disagreement on that as well. So if the staff came back to us with those two options and what they might look like for a potential decision, and we can refine it, and as we get further down the funnel to making a decision, maybe that would be appropriate at this point in time.
Brian?
I just wanted to clarify a point that Rob had brought up with the ARPA money and the survey. As far as I understand it, public safety isn't even an allowable expense for ARPA. So that's probably why it wasn't on the survey, and probably why we shouldn't even be talking about that option.
All right. Well, I guess I wanted to say, we have two they're related, but very different problems here. The sheriff has a pretty immediate problem. They're facing a fiscal cliff over at the county, and it really is more of an emergency. We have a levy. Our public safety is funded. It's funded 3 years at a time, which is inconvenient and uncertain, but it's not a major crisis, at least as far as I'm concerned. So I guess we have a couple of different questions here. One is, do we want to entertain the sheriff's sales tax conversation and be a part of that? And then the other is looking forward with our own situation. I've heard a strong interest from several people anyway in waiting until July or August until we learn more about those ARPA funds and whether we'll be getting any outside grants or additional help to pay for the water treatment plant. So I guess we need to answer what we would need in the meantime to continue this discussion, or whether we just need to wait and see what happens with the water treatment plant later this summer before we really continue on very strongly with our own public safety discussion. But let's talk about the county for a minute, because that one is looming, and if we don't need to come to a conclusion today, but sooner rather than later, right? Rob?
So Aaron, is it accurate that a sales tax can be enacted by the city council, or can it only be enacted by a vote of the people?
It could be either way. Council does have the authority, or you can refer it to a vote.
So if council were to enact a sales tax, it would just be for the city, it wouldn't include the county, correct?
Correct.
Do you happen to know if the county commissioners can enact a sales tax in the county, or?
I'd refer to Augustus on that one.
I guess so. And you can answer. It doesn't matter that much at this point. But the point, I guess, that I'd like to make that maybe the council could, discuss is if, and that's a big if in my mind, we are going to support a sales tax, would we be supporting putting it to a vote of the people, or would we be supporting council enacting it without a vote of the people?
It would probably be through a vote of the people. And if I remember correctly, through the county, it's only through a vote of the people as well.
But the city is either way, right, or no?
No, the city is either way.
Right.
Yeah.
So council would have to decide if, but if the county were to put it to a vote of the people, then it includes the city as well, right?
Yes, that's what the sheriff's been discussing,
Right.
is putting it on the ballot later this fall.
So he's just waiting to get a read on who different influencers, which way we're going to go.
So, as I understand it, the sheriff's proposal is to include the county and the city through a vote of the people.
Rick?
So the sheriff's proposal is to include the county and the city, and as you said, a vote of the people. But it's also been mentioned, the city council, and I imagine the board of commissioners, if they wanted to come forward with their own sales tax, they could do it as a governmental entity. But could they, if we, the city, consider ourselves part of the team with the county, and we both want to come forward with a sales tax, can we not write the ordinance that includes the county and the city together as partners? And if we so desired, the Board of Commissioners and the City Council could enact it?
Yes, that was what the sheriff is wanting to do, and that would have to be done through a vote of the people if it was going to apply both to the city and the county, just because the city can do its own on its own, but the county, I don't believe can. I believe the county, it is only through the vote of the people, and that might be pursuant to the county charter.
Okay, that helps me quite a bit. Thank you.
Vanessa, then Valerie, then DJ.
Yeah, Mayor, you bring up a great point that unfortunately the county and the city are on different timelines, and I do value an attempt at a partnership to help the county with what they're experiencing. So my request for additional data still stands, and I do believe that Sheriff Daniel is essentially looking for council support in the infancy stages of this idea. So I would ask that the council has a hard date that they are able to provide him, either a yay or a nay, so that he knows what he's working with.
Valerie, then DJ.
Yeah, I think I'm basically saying the same thing Vanessa is. The public safety is a community-wide issue, and I think that in a way the county, yes, is more desperate, but we also know and recognize that, we definitely need more money to support our public safety. I think the community recognizes that, especially under the circumstances that we're in right now. I think I would like to see, maybe to simplify what we're asking for from the county to come up with is just what would it be like if we did do the 3%, we kept 1%, because one of the things been talked about is once you get somebody established in paying a tax and having it come and go, there's a certain ease that comes with it, and you can up it, but just having it there as a base, there's a certain consistency there, which I think would be positive. I also would like to see just a 1% year-round, 3% and a $5,000 max on the amount, and what would that bring in? But if that could bring in for us to just get rid of the levy, that would be, that would help us all out. So I would like to think that the city and the county could work together for the benefit of all our constituents. And we all recognize the need, and this might be the time to come together and go out into the community and do especially now that the mask mandate's off, to have a community conversation about what is really necessary for and best for us public safety wise, and educate them and understand how much less is paid in our community for the services as opposed to the rest of the state. Because I hear people all the time say, well, look what that community has or what that community has. And it's just like, well, that's because they pay for it. So getting people to understand is how much less we actually pay, I think might be important as well.
DJ?
Yeah, given that the sheriff's angle is putting it on the ballot, I see no reason why I personally wouldn't be willing to entertain further discussion on that front. As others have said, I'm willing to define a timely answer for the sheriff. Let's keep talking about this both on the county and the city front, and let's keep it on the schedule. Thanks.
Brian?
So I think it would be great if we could work together with the county. I think that we might want to look at another alternative besides the sales tax option. As I said, I don't feel like that has a strong chance of success. So I would offer an alternative option of a county-wide levy. That levy would fund city police, public safety, the sheriff, and the existing jail levy. So essentially it would be two things that are already levied and just adding the sheriff's department. And I'd be interested in seeing, how much money that would bring in if, say, for example, the $1.79 rate was countywide. City residents wouldn't be paying more. County residents would be getting sheriff services and jail services, and there's the potential for all of our law enforcement divisions to be made whole, and to have the public every 5 years be able to have the opportunity to renew that. So, I mean, if we're going to be asking for data requests, my request would be what kind of revenue would a $1.79 countywide levy bring in as opposed to the sales tax?
All right. Further thoughts? Rob?
Yeah, Brian, I think that brings up a really excellent point. Right now, the city, we in the city have already acknowledged that we're willing to pay more for services. I mean, when I dial 911, I want to be confident that within 2 to 3 to 4 to 8 to 10 minutes, there's going to be somebody at my door. If I need an ambulance to the hospital, I want to know that I can get there within a few minutes, and I'm willing to pay more for that. So far, the people in the county have made the conscious decision to not be able to take advantage of those kinds of services. So we, as a city, it's philosophical, but what obligation, in a certain sense, do we have to help protect those who are not willing to pay the same that we're willing to pay? They make the conscious decision to live in the county. They could have made a conscious decision to live in the city and pay more. So I have to put out a $1.79 levy in the county, it's a great idea. I mean, and if they want to get, if they want to have services, they can pay for them. But, and I'm not, I am sounding somewhat callous, and I'm not trying to sound that way, but reality is in the same way that Valerie said, some cities have more stuff because they're willing to pay for it. Well, in our county, the city has more services because we're willing to pay for it. But I totally would support, putting a levy on the ballot for the people in the county to weigh in. If they're not willing to help themselves, I don't know how much responsibility we have.
All right, well, personally, I think you're spot on there, Rob, with not letting the county's problems become our problems, even though obviously we're part of the county and we need to work together. However, as far as this discussion goes, I'm not sure what we're all saying as a group here. We've got a couple people interested in more information, both about a 5-year levy, more information about the sheriff's proposal, and running some different numbers to see how that would progress. But I'm not even sure that I've got maybe a solid 4 or 5 in favor of working on the county issue at all. So Brian.
If there's not council support, I'm happy to work directly with the sheriff to figure out what those numbers are for a countywide levy.
All right, I guess as far as what we're asking for city staff, let's kind of break it down here. We had city or county a request to crunch some different numbers regarding the sales tax. And I've heard Vanessa and Valerie, I believe, in support of that. Kurt, yes? Okay, Joel is also saying yes. And I believe DJ said yes, so we're up to 5 on that. I did not write down the specific request that Vanessa put in as far as the numbers, but I think staff can either gather that from the video or get in touch with her. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I just wanted clarification. We need to approach this 2 different ways potentially, and what I'm thinking is this is a request. This is a request for the city to explore what a city sales tax would look like potentially at 1%, and we could provide some numbers for you or something along those lines and get something that will give you an idea on whether or not you want to explore that more versus we're going to be looking at the county's proposal and what their sales tax is and changing that formula. That's something a little different. And so I just wanted to clarify which one we're acquiring the sales tax information for.
Well, I think Vanessa's request was specifically to work with the county.
So we'll be asking the county to do some additional number crunching and see if they can provide us something. Okay.
Yes. And DJ, go ahead.
Yeah, just clarifying, Vanessa proposed investigating a heightened percentage and heightened caps. I need to be explicit that I'm not in favor of that at this point. So if that's included into that, take me off the list. What I am in favor of is a cooperative effort with the county in discussing public safety as a whole, based more on what the sheriff is proposing.
And then also, if I can get some clarity on what characteristics of the current proposed sales tax proposal that the sheriff provided today you would like to have different, that would be helpful.
Go ahead, Vanessa.
Yeah, to clarify, it is 4 different scenarios. The amount of revenue raised under an all-year tax at 1%, with the seasonal at 2%. The second is an all-year tax at 1% and a seasonal at 3%. The third would be 1.5% all year and 3% seasonal, and the amount of revenues additionally raised with spending caps at $3,000 to $9,000, with revenues for each in $1,000 increments.
All right. Brian had also suggested working with the county to consider a county-wide public safety levy. Is there council interest in finding out more information about that option? Seeing a couple nods that way, and I think I've got you up to 4.
I understand something there. So the city has $1.79 already. What prevents the county from going out for get $1.79? Why would we have to have anything, a joint agreement with them for them to do that?
I think the theory is that if the entire voting base is bundled together, there's a higher chance of success.
So that's a very complex
Yeah.
response to that request, as there's different levels of service, different costs of services between the county and the city, and so it's going to be difficult to, I think, apportion, unless the services were all the same and equal, what the levy rate would be. So say, for instance, a countywide levy would be relatively easy to apportion out if it was serviced by all just one entity. Say the county contracted with the city for services, or the city no longer has a city police department, but it now contracts with the sheriffs, which very small cities do sometimes, or something along those lines. But when you have two entities with providing two different services and different levels of services, to have a flat rate, someone is going to be subsidizing another.
Like I said earlier, I'm more than happy to do that work and not put that on staff, so you guys don't have to do that.
All right. Brian has volunteered to take that on. As far as our internal discussion here about permanent funding for public safety, is there a different, any more information that you would like staff to pursue gathering for us, or shall we just put this on the back burner until after we hear more about the water treatment plant later this summer? Rob?
So I don't think it would be too difficult for Adam to basically come out with a chart for us, for every $5 million in grant money that we could potentially get, or for that matter, ARPA money, even, whatever the money is, it doesn't really matter the source. But for every additional $5 million that we get towards our water treatment plant, how much does that save on the interest? And then we can get a rough idea of, where we might be going with this. But I don't think that that's I'm sure that he can do something like that pretty simply. But that way we would know before July what the parameters are of what we might be waiting for. So I'd like to see him just come up with that chart for us, $5 million gradations, and we'd have an idea of what we have to play with, so to speak.
That would be, is it okay? So that would be a great thing to have. The only problem with it, and it's a mathematical issue, is we don't know what the interest rate is. And so, because those grants can change the interest rate, and we don't know, and so it adds another level of complexity and variable in on there. And then if you add too many unknowns, pretty soon you're looking at something that you're not sure of. So I would suggest that we wait till then, if we got the time, and that way we'll know because of that other variable.
Adam, do you have a recommendation?
I would say that at this time it is not a simple calculation. The figures that have been provided in past presentations were based off of a set number of assumptions, which have changed drastically in recent months, including interest rates as well as total costs of the project and total debt. And then, of course, the grant funding being another potential funding source is another very, very large variable. So at the moment, it would be a complete reworking of the analysis on our current rate structure and current projected costs and assumptions on interest rates. So it would not be simple. It absolutely can be done, but not quickly, I would say.
Okay, are you okay with holding off, Rob? All right. Anything else that council is interested in pursuing before we hear more back about the water treatment costs? All right. Well, it sounds like we're going to entertain.
Sarah, I just
okay.
wanted to clarify something and say something that I do agree that we need to kind of come up with a date when we can get numbers through the county, so the county does have an idea whether we're on board and where we're going with it, because they're on a limited schedule. So I do think it's important that we get the information as simply as possible and as soon as possible from the county on theirs, because I think that will be the first step to take to decide whether we're backing it, and then the other part will just naturally come down later on. But that could be a solve to our problem if we were to get out and sell it and make it work with the new numbers. So I'd like to get that done soon.
We'll get the request out to the sheriff this week and ask for a timely response, so you have some time to either endorse or make recommended changes.
Thank you.
Rob.
So a question, if the council is quote unquote on board with a sales tax, what does that actually mean? What does that mean we're on board? Does that mean a majority vote? Does that mean, so what does that look like?
I think there's not that question on the table yet. You know, I think that would be something for the council to decide at a future point.
Well, Valerie just used that term, and I just was wondering what she must have had something in mind when she said if the council's on board. So
Well, I was just basically saying, once we get the information, if we decide to endorse and support them, is what I was talking about. Because obviously, through supporting them, we're supporting that sales tax, or seasonal sales tax for the 1% year-round. So, but we need to have that information first before we can make that decision and let them know whether we're making it go out in support of what they're doing, which we will benefit from as well. Does that clarify that, Ron?
Not really, but it's fine for now.
Okay.
It still doesn't specifically say what that support would look like for
But
that.
we'll have numbers that we will have more information to decide, make a
No,
decision
I'm saying, but
on.
once a council making decision, so what does that mean? A majority of the council votes to say, we like the idea of a sales tax. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so, thank you.
Okay, I have another request for information, which is just that we get some background on the history of both the public safety levies and sales tax votes in the past, because I know we had one about 5 years ago that failed by about 3/4 of the voters. So it'd be good to know that before council pursues putting anything forward with a sales tax. 78%, Rob says. That's about what I remember there. Thanks. All right.
I think that's correct. Do you still need a report on that, or?
I would like it to be part of our next discussion on this, to, in memo form or presentation form, so that we have that information.
All right, we'll
in
include
front of
that
us.
with
Yep.
the information from the county.
Thank you. All right, and I agree with we need to make a decision sooner than later and let the sheriff know one way or another. And if anybody has any ideas, he does have a very significant problem that he's dealing with in a rather short timeline. So all ideas welcome, and it sounds like he was flexible on that as well. Go ahead, Brian.
Should we be talking now about when we should be getting an answer to him, or should we be waiting?
Well, I think the first thing is a request for more information that's going to be on the county to provide that information.
Okay.
All right. How about a new topic, Highway 199?
Hello, Council Mayor. My name is Wade Elliott. I haven't seen you guys for a while. It's been about 2 years, I think, since I've been in front of you, so it's good to see your faces. We're talking about one of the best things in the city, and that is traffic and traffic theory and traffic planning. So if you got any questions when we're at the end of it, I'd be happy to answer them. So this presentation is in regards to a potential amendment to the transportation system plan, which I know we just adopted in 2020, but this would be to widen Dowell Road in conjunction with ODOT's 199 Expressway plan. As you recall, not too long ago, in October of 2020, we adopted the transportation plan. I'm just going to call it the TSP, if you guys are okay with that. And it's got a 20-year planning horizon that contains a fiscally constrained project list. And there's 3 tiers of projects. Tier 1, we have the money within 20 years to build it. Tier 2, if we get some grants, we can. Tier 3 is wishful thinking, but we want them in there anyways. So amendments to the TSP are subject to regulatory review from the Department of Land Conservation and Development. I'll be abbreviating that as DLCD if that's okay, and the Urban Area Planning Commission and public comment. So ODOT has its own US 199 Expressway plan, which we nod to in our transportation system plan. So it's kind of adopted tertiarily into our plan. But the plan was adopted to address vehicular and pedestrian upgrades along US 199 from Tussey Lane to Midway Avenue, which is all the way out by the college. The city and ODOT have also executed a memorandum of understanding that we are going to mutually try to pursue a path forward for segment 3, which is from Allen Creek to Tussey Lane. And also portions of this plan have been constructed, such as the separated 4-lane section out there by the college. And the section that we're talking about today is the section from Tussey Lane to Dowell Road. And there has been a revised or a regional environmental assessment done in this area by ODOT to determine its effects. And that was done quite a while ago. So in this section of the project, they're looking to transition from 4 to 6 lanes at Dowell Road and have dedicated turn lanes to Dowell Road. And they want to feature more turn lanes and shift the Allen Creek and Redwood Avenue intersection to the north. And they want to get rid of the existing signal, which is right in front of the fairgrounds, and have all the traffic utilize Allen Creek Road. That's a lot to describe in words, so here's some pictures that'll help better. So this is an overview that came from their US 199 Expressway plan. You can see the Josephine County Fairgrounds is right here. Here's the kind of bump out of the intersection of Allen Creek, and it comes back into Redwood Avenue. And here's a better picture of it that shows that you can still get off of the road, off of Redwood Highway, and enter here, but all other traffic that's trying to get out would need to use Allen Creek, so there won't be this intersection that we usually use in front of the fairgrounds. So a lot of development has happened since that plan was created several decades ago. 2008 alignment, I guess not quite 2 decades. But recently we had one of our consultants take a look at how we may still be able to fit their idea into the area while still considering some of the recent developments. This is a reasonably new aerial photo, but it also doesn't show the Flying Lark development, but it does have some of the other ones in the area. So this plan is still plausible. But one thing that we've been in contact with ODOT is to show us a few new ways that we can get away from realigning Redwood Avenue and still be able to have them do their project. So they've recently been running a whole bunch of traffic models. I'm not really sure how they do those, but it's a lot of computer work. So what you're looking at here is we've got 4 columns. One is no build for the 2045 horizon. And it says V/C, which is volume over capacity. And then they have the revised environmental assessment preferred alternative, which is the one with the realignment of Redwood Avenue. And they also have one called the McDonald concept, which would be to put a new connector through McDonald Road. And they also have one that has widening of Dowell Creek or Dowell Road along with the preferred alternative. And then as you look down in the rows, you have different intersections and how they are affected by each one of these during their models. So typically we try to target a 0.75 to a 0.85 vehicle to capacity ratio. And that's what we consider good. And as you'll see, all these bolded ones are getting pretty bad. So as you look at the no build, if we do nothing, we will be over capacity, or what we consider okay, at the intersection of US 199 and Allen Creek, as well as Redwood Avenue in Allen Creek. And it's kind of like pushing peas around on the plate as they try to do these. There's no way that we can get rid of the cars. So if you put, like, say, a widening on Dowell Road, more of the cars go to Dowell Road, creating more issues there, but it may alleviate it at some other location. And so there's no silver bullet here, other than, potentially, a fourth bridge or a new highway or something like that that would actually take cars out of the area. So what ODOT is asking us to do is to consider amending our 2040 TSP to include a project to widen Dowell Road. And what that would do, right now it's got 2 travel lanes, 1 center turn lane. And what it would do is be to put 2 through lanes in each direction. So 4 total lanes, as well as additional turning lanes at both sides, which would accommodate more traffic. And they did say that this may eliminate the need to realign Redwood Avenue at the Allen Creek Road intersection, which I think would be good for a lot of the businesses and as well as the fairgrounds. So this is not currently in our plan, and as we take a zoomed in view of what Dowell Road looks like kind of in the middle section, it's got a lot of commercial, mostly light commercial, light industrial type of uses, but there's no room to widen the road in here. So just looking right there, if you got to add another 2 lanes, travel lanes in there, we're going to be having some really large impacts to some of the property owners. So it's only 1,300 feet long. I'm estimating really roughly, extrapolating numbers off of the Allen Creek Road project, that it's going to cost in the $6 to $10 million range. So what would that do? We'd need to amend our transportation system plan, which could take anywhere between 3 and 12 months. I'll get more into the higher side of that here in a minute. Staff would recommend a robust public outreach and input effort. I think that we need to do some stakeholder meetings with those that may or may not be affected by this project. And then we could also, maybe contact each property owner and consult them, see what their comments are. The financial side of this, it'd be pretty inexpensive. We have a David Evans and Associates that did our transportation system plan just a couple years ago, still has the model all fired up and ready to go. So it wouldn't take a lot on that side, but getting things through the planning process as well as the public comment period could be a little bit difficult. In that timing, 3 to 12 months is important because the Department of Land Conservation and Development has proposed significant changes to the transportation planning rule through the climate change and equity rule from the state. In general, projects that make it easier for putting more cars through there are not going to be approved in future plans. That's what Dowell would be. As we look at roads like Hillcrest that don't have pedestrian or bike lanes in them, we can upgrade those roads that were county roads and put in multimodal options. But something like Dowell that already has bike lanes and already has sidewalks, just to widen it to allow more vehicles, likely won't make it through the transportation planning rule. So time is of the essence. If we want to do this amendment, we need to get it done by, I think it's on my next slide, December 31st, 2022 is when these rules come into effect. So our transportation system plan is good through the 2040 horizon unless we crack it open and try to do an amendment or need to change something, at which point we'll need to comply with the new transportation planning rule. So today, I guess we're asking you, here's some next steps and some things to think about. If the city pursues this amendment, an offsetting dollar amount of projects will have to be taken out of our transportation system plan. It has to be fiscally constrained. So when we look at how much money we'll have in the next 20 years, if we add a project that's $10 million, we need to take one out that's $10 million. And we would have recommendations, of course, if it came to that. And if the city chooses not to pursue this amendment, ODOT may choose not to move forward with this portion of Highway 199 Expressway plan. And then future projects like this one are probably not likely to receive state funding. In general, state funding as well as approval are generally trending towards things that are multimodal, transit oriented. And if ODOT does not move forward with this project, there's really no guarantees that they'll do a similar project, because they need to be under the same transportation planning rules as we are. So these projects may be a thing of the past. So today I'm asking you if you would like us to start work on an amendment to the transportation system plan to widen Dowell Road, or not to do that. It's really up to your discretion.
Thanks, Wade.
Thank
Council,
you.
what questions do you have? Brian, then Vanessa?
Thanks, Wade. I see on this chart of different options here, there's an option titled McDonald concept. Could you speak about that briefly?
Sure. So this one was brought up by Commissioner DeYoung. We've been in talks for quite a while on this project with ODOT, and Commissioner DeYoung was wondering whether or not McDowell kind of ends up there at CCAS Express. It would just be kind of blowing out the end of that cul-de-sac and making a new signalized approach with US 199. Casa Amiga, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Okay, so is that alternative to Dowell widening? Is that what the idea is?
It should be, but it's not. So if we were to do that, it would require a whole new regional environmental assessment from ODOT. And by the time that was completed, we'd be after that deadline. And this wouldn't be a qualifying project going forward. So not really. It was when we looked at it and ran a traffic model on it, but in reality, no, it's not very viable.
Thank you.
Yep.
Vanessa?
I think that may also defeat the purpose of the expressway. The thought behind those are to keep vehicles moving, and a stoplight would prohibit that. A condition for approval for all private development in the city under Section 19 of the Development Code is to be in compliance with traffic plans. So how are we here today? How did this happen?
Could you ask that another way for me?
If any development in the map shown in the PowerPoint, if it is not in compliance with future traffic plans, how was it ever allowed?
I got you now. So I can't speak to some of the things that have happened in the past. Now, as we've been working through some of these, like the Flying Lark development, we have been asking for those pieces of right-of-way, but I don't think that was always the case. Also, our plan, kind of like the fourth bridge, it shows a couple lines on a map to say, here's where this road is going to go through, but it doesn't have a detailed design like that one. So when a development came in and said, hey, are we going to be in your alignment here? We're like, well, it's close. And that may have been what happened. I can't speak to that.
Valerie?
Yeah, I've been trying to wrap my head around this new transportation rule and the multimodal thing, but you know, one of the issues that we were trying to solve is just the Tussey, just through the fairgrounds down to Dowell, and the fact that, you know, that's where the bottleneck is right there. But you're saying that but there are no sidewalks or bicycle lanes in there either, are there?
On Dowell? I believe there are.
On Dowell there are, but I'm saying on Highway 199, there's not. So I'm thinking to myself, well, that seems to me that it would be an upgrade to do some sort of work there between Tussey on 199, and would that be an allowable thing? Because that's part of what's missing, is that there are no sidewalks and no bicycle lanes on that avenue. So is that a viable thing that could work down the road just because we don't have those as well?
Yeah, I think so. And I think ODOT, I don't want to speak for them, but I think they'd be happy to look at that.
Yeah, because I think, you know, I think through this whole process, and I have been in this process with Dan and, you know, trying to look for a solution, to me, the Dowell Road doesn't really, for $10 million, to me, it's not worth going for. Because I really think the biggest problem is closer to town, where there are no sidewalks, where there's nothing established there. And that would also go along with trying to get rid of the light right in front of the fairgrounds, which is kind of a nightmare, even when you're trying to get to the fairgrounds with kids, because there's no sidewalks and things there. So I'm just, like I said, this whole thing just kind of threw me for a loop when we had the discussion with them, and they were going I really don't understand the volume to capacity and their numbers and all that they went through is just beyond my brain capacity. And I was disappointed that we weren't looking closer down to the Tussey Lane part of that. So is that something that will not be able to be worked on moving forward with the new ruling, transportation ruling?
I think it could be difficult to get new projects unless they have one scoped out that's already in their transportation improvement plan, which I don't think that they do. It could be hard to get those in the future. I mean, I think we could do enhancements to pedestrian and multimodal, but as far as adding more lanes and capacity, I'm not so sure.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, obviously, that's what's changing. They're changing and saying we don't want to add more lanes because we're discouraging more car usage. But we are trying to encourage more bicycle use. Is there a possibility that we talked about a pedestrian and a bicycle bridge between, at 5th. Could that be tied in somehow to that part of Highway 199? I'm not sure where that would come across.
It could be. I think that one got shot out of the sky for me though, because it's within the view shed of the historic Caveman Bridge. So.
Oh, okay.
I don't think
so
I can
it can't
build
be
one
done there. Okay, so that was my question.
Something
was that
similar.
Was something that we thought we could still pursue. Is that in our transportation plan now?
It is. Yep.
It is.
A
But
pedestrian bridge is.
okay, but it was shot down for what? Because of view?
Yeah, it's within the view shed of the historic Caveman Bridge.
So what does a view shed have to do with anything?
Just.
Is that
Yeah.
a rule? I mean, I'm just saying, is that is a ruling saying that we can't have it because it's a.
It could make getting the approval process much more difficult because of the historic nature of the Caveman Bridge.
Okay. Okay. So that brings me to another question, and this is another thing that moving forward is that I kind of feel like if we're going to spend $6 to $10 million, that we might be better off to look to $6 to $10 million towards a study of the Fourth Bridge and how that ties in, because that is currently in our transportation plan, correct?
Yes, it is. It's I believe it's a tier 2 project, but it is in our plan. So it's saying if we got a bunch of grant funding, we could target it. But yeah.
Okay, so and if we had a study, we'd have a better chance of getting that grant funding if we had a study done as to having that done. And am I correct in saying that Fourth Bridge at the location on Lincoln Road is where it's at, that if we put it somewhere else, that it would only need, that would be our best bet of getting a study done, is if we went along with what our transportation plan numbers-wise showed?
Yeah, I think so. And it was shown to be the most advantageous location for it, to get most of the traffic peeled off of the South Y. So I think that'd be our best bet.
Okay. Thank you. So that's basically what I would think my recommendation would be, not necessarily to do Dell Road and look at a study or something to do the Fourth Bridge.
Okay.
Or working on, and also getting some sort of multimodal down close to us in that area, because that is a problem.
Sure. Thank you.
Rob, then Rick.
Yeah, I totally agree with the two main points that Val just made. I think we can, essentially chase our tail on so many other small projects, but the Fourth Bridge would really help a lot of these things in future years become really clear as far as how to solve future problems. But the question I have is on the widening the Dowell Road, which I don't think I'm supporting, but does that, when you say widening Dowell Road, does that also, the 6 to 10 million, does that include either having to buy property or essentially seize property by eminent domain and then pay for it? But one of those two, you either have to come to an agreement or you'd have to seize it. Is that correct, to be able to do that?
Yeah, that would be correct. And I think we're in the ballpark with that estimate. I just kind of extrapolated off of Allen Creek Road because we're going to have to acquire a lot of property along there too. So I thought it was a decent comparison. It also uses federal money, which this one likely would too.
So 6 to 10 million would potentially cover the paving and the property acquisition?
Yep.
Thank you.
Rick.
Thank you, Wade. Also on the Fourth Bridge at the current location, of course it's not built today and it would be probably 5 or 10 years out before it would be built, as well as ODOT putting it on their plan. How difficult would it be to, again, look at new studies to a different location that may represent the future expansion of the city limits.
We could, and I can get you the exact reference in our transportation system plan, but we looked at several locations, and there are other options. There are. It's just that you don't get quite as many vehicles to use them as you do at that location. But we can look elsewhere.
If we have further information, I'd appreciate that to be included. Thank you.
Yep. And I got to run. Sorry, I got to go get my daughter.
We're doing a switch off here.
Yep.
Thanks, Wade. All right.
And I'll try my best to answer the questions as well as he did.
Okay. I think Rick is also running off, right? Time for you to go? Okay. Brian.
Hi, Jason.
Hi.
So I agree with a lot of what Valerie said and following up with what Rob said. I'm less inclined to pursue widening on Dowell and more inclined to pursue the Fourth Bridge study. I think that's really the crux of our issue here, and the sooner we get working on that, the better.
Okay. Does the Fourth Bridge still do the bulb out? Is that part of the Fourth
Under
Bridge
the current design, that's part of what the intent of the Dowell Road widening was. The thought was with the Dowell Road widening, it takes more traffic off of that lower end, so you don't need that bump out at Redwood Avenue at the intersection of Allen Creek Road.
And the purpose of that is because of the short distance between Redwood Avenue and Redwood Highway on Allen Creek Road, is that correct?
It allowed for more queuing of vehicles in that short section between the highway and the avenue.
Okay, it's kind of like a certain amount of the queuing problem that you have now currently between Union Avenue and at the four-way stop.
Very
because
similar.
It's so short.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions right now? Vanessa.
Yeah, I want to be clear that the realignment of Redwood Avenue and Allen Creek is still possible. Is that correct?
It is. We've done some initial looking. It'll have to shift a little bit to the west to kind of move it out of the way of the Flying Lark a little bit, and it'll put it through a portion of the parking lot right there and take out several buildings to the west. But it will still work.
Okay, I'm confused by that. When you say to avoid the Flying Lark, is that the infrastructure or the parking of that facility?
It would, the way it was originally designed, the part of that bump out would actually go through where the building is today. It can be shortened up and moved slightly to the west to serve the same purpose without taking out the building. It would just take out parking lot infrastructure.
One of the conditions for approval of that project was to move it as far east as possible so as not to interfere with the realignment. So was the development out of compliance with that condition?
No, I believe it was, but to do that, we still had to shorten up that bump out. It couldn't be as long and as smooth as the original concept was. So it had to be kind of shrunk up, and so that made the bumps steeper as opposed to less smooth.
Thank you.
Yep.
Brian.
So on this, I guess, schematic of the bulb out, the bump out, I think Wade said that we had somebody do that for us.
We did. The current traffic consultant did realign it, and if you look at this configuration, which is the one that we redid, even though you can't tell, it does miss the building, but it does take out part of the parking lot.
Has ODOT given their opinion on this at all yet?
They looked at it and said it still works. That is their preferred, but we are trying to find an alternative where we don't have to do this, just because it is so, I mean, if you look at what that has to go through, we're destroying a neighborhood,
It looks like a
lot of
total
commercial.
nightmare. Yeah.
This is definitely not a preferred alternative today.
Do you think there's a possibility that ODOT, with all of their knowledge and experience, could come up with other alternatives besides this?
This was their idea.
Yeah,
This was their idea.
This Dowell Road was their idea. That's why it kind of threw it off. That is their idea, with having their modeling and their engineers and all of their people up there look at it. This was what they came up with.
Do they have other ideas or just this one?
There weren't a lot of ideas. This is a tough area here. It is a tough nut to crack. In talking with our traffic consultant, David Evans, and Associates, we're wondering if possibly McDonald is viable, but instead of just it popping out, it actually turns into a whole four-way and then connects over and ties into Scoville. So we move people back off of the highway and get them onto those side streets. So, but that's, again, a concept that's not in anybody's plan. These are things that are going to have to be fleshed out over the years. I think today what I'm hearing very clearly is we definitely don't want to add Dowell Road widening to the TSP and spend the money on that direction. We need to go look for other alternatives.
Are we to the point now to where we're getting, because it seems like we're kind of getting already behind the 8 ball with the 4th bridge with it's getting squeezed.
It is.
Should we be considering property acquisition now for that project? Because it sounds like the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be.
Yes.
Okay.
If that would be a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Valerie.
My question, because I agree that the McDonald, I was disappointed that they didn't push it all the way through, because that was what I assumed that they were going to do in the first place. But that part of it, because the Scoville, that part of it would be on us, right? Because that's not a state highway. So I'm assuming that, you know, that would be more of an expense on our part. And is that in the TSP?
Scoville might be the completion of Scoville. I think what our hope was tying all of those together, again, shows the traffic improvement on all of their intersections. And by putting all of those projects together, it means that they're willing to come to the table or at least support funding for that larger project that takes traffic off of their system.
Okay.
Is Scoville, like, I thought Scoville is at the north end of town. Are we talking about the wrong name
Not
of the road?
Scoville, it's,
oh, you're right.
it's out by Schützenholm.
Schutzwald.
Schutzwald, yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
what it is.
Sorry.
Schutzwald.
I always get those
Schutzwald.
crossed up. It's Schutzwald. Thank you.
Yeah, you had us all confused there.
Sorry. It's a roundabout way to get there.
It really is. That will really alleviate, it's the new plan. That will alleviate traffic on the south end of town if everybody just takes Scoville Road, please. Thank you. Our work here is done.
Sorry.
All right, well, it sounds to me I'm not hearing, well, I guess let's finish questions. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, not hearing any great interest for widening Dowell Road. Stop me if I'm wrong. But I am hearing council speak up in favor of really getting a good plan going for the 4th bridge. Is that true? Are you raising your hand? Okay, Brian, go ahead.
Just an additional comment. Jason just said something about maybe there being a potential for McDonald's still being an option. Is that, did I hear you right?
Sorry. It was something that wasn't considered, but that our traffic consultant did propose back to Wade, that we counter-proposed to ODOT that they actually make McDonald cross all the way and complete Scoville, because it might do the same thing.
Schützenwald.
Schutzwald. And now that I've said it, I am never going to be able to say it the other way around. I apologize. But yeah, to complete Schutzwald and see if that, and model that and see what it does with the traffic.
Okay, I would be in favor of seeing if that helps the situation at all and if that's possible.
Okay, y'all have me Googling here what McDonald is. That is the road that Casa Ymca is on with quality fence at the other end there.
Yes.
Okay.
And also, and this isn't something I tried to get across to ODOT, and I'm sure this isn't on our radar, but that's a huge part of our UGB growth is out towards Schutzwald as well. So pushing McDonald through or making that four-way would also open up a lot of, would give us probably a TIA, whatever, in opening up that part of our UGB for housing.
Vanessa.
Yeah, I see issues at McDonald Lane prohibiting the idea of an expressway. I think it would help to mitigate the traffic in the area, but it doesn't continue the flow of traffic in and out of town. So I see that being an issue, although I do support exploring possibly what that could look like. I do definitely support the original realignment of Redwood Avenue and Allen Creek Road, in cohesion with the plans for the fourth bridge and also with the plan development that we have at Allen Creek. I think that would really help bring that all together.
Okay. So, no action on Dowell Road, and let's get Fourth Bridge plans underway to get that back in front of council or whatever we need to do to take the next step in that process. Anything further on this topic? Okay. Agenda review. We have a meeting Wednesday. We have a public hearing on an ordinance that would have a property line vacation at the Cathedral Square, and ordinance, a council action item that would change the municipal code, Title VI, Uniform Traffic Code Standards for electric charging stations. We've added a resolution regarding caveman pool maintenance. Consent calendar has a resolution that would amend the comprehensive fee schedule, and a motion that would be a landscape text amendment for findings of fact, appointing 6 members to the Tourism Advisory Committee, and then an executive session. Does anybody have questions about that? Alrighty. Then next week before our workshop is when we are going to have the ribbon cutting ceremony for the electric charging station at the Downtown Welcome Center. And then the workshop itself will be about the land and buildings project prioritization, and coming back at you with the urban campground grant contract language. Any questions about that? Brian?
Yeah, I just want to go back to the Wednesday meeting. I didn't see it on the agenda for consent agenda, but on the actual agenda, it talks about a resolution amending the fee schedule for, I guess it is on here, it just goes into more detail on our agenda about the electric vehicle charging station fees and fines. Under consent, and I would like to star that, please.
The electric charging stations is a council action item, I believe.
It's a different item under, it's a different item.
Okay.
Yeah, there's 2 items related to that, and one of them's on consent.
So I guess the agenda I'm looking at here is not correct or something?
No.
Okay. So I guess star that item under consent. Jason?
I was just going to say my presentation on the amendment to Title VI parking was going to include the fee information and fine information, so I was going to do that in one order, but because one was an ordinance and the other was a resolution, we would cover it all in one, and then if you wanted to pull it, but I can break it into 2 shorter presentations and just do a short presentation for the consent item if that's the preference. Okay.
You want it broken in 2? Or?
Well, I just don't want to, I want a separate vote from consent for that item. So if it needs to be
so that's
council
actually
action.
not a starred item, that's just moving it off of consent, is what
We'll
you
just
want.
move it to council action.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so move that one to council action.
Thank you.
All right. Then March 28th's workshop is again following up on the land and building prioritization along with the Urban Renewal Agency, and this as well as a second item that's the CEDC motion to adopt Spalding Park Action Plan. So that one I'm seeing has 3 stars, which is a lot of time, and I have been specifically keeping items off of the March 28th workshop because we were talking about the other portion taking a fair amount of time. So I'm wondering how a 30-minute item is sneaking in there.
Yeah, we can, you can put it into another date if you'd like.
Okay, I just feel like we had an agenda setting meeting on Wednesday and I don't remember that being on there. Perhaps it was, but I swear every time I turn my head, this thing is changing on me, so.
Mayor?
Yeah.
I would ask if there's any time sensitivity to that motion. I know that there's transportation and infrastructure dollars coming down, so I'd like to know if that should be prioritized over that presentation, that it's alongside the URA and LB project list.
Yeah, I'm not, I don't know anything about it because today is the first I heard of it and you were present at the agenda setting meeting last Wednesday, and it would just seem to me that the agenda setting meeting, you know, would be to set the agenda. And so to have 3 days later something pop up that I don't know anything about, you know, it makes me feel like the whole agenda setting meeting is a little bit of a farce, so.
That's understandable.
Yeah, I'm just saying, that, I mean, the CEDC made a motion, and I think it's just kind of like what comes from when any committee makes a motion, they want to bring it to their attention. I think that's just kind of what happened, is that they asked for that.
Absolutely, but there are things that council has asked
Oh, I
for
know,
that
I'm
we
just
have
saying.
specifically not
Yeah.
put on that date, and now to have something else, you know, that's more than 5 minutes, not how I would have done it, but I don't know what it is, so I can't
Mayor,
say whether I'd put it there
Mayor,
or
we
not.
can schedule for any time in April if you'd like, if you'd pick a workshop, and if it's time sensitive, we'll go back to you on it.
All right. Anything further that you want to add, Joel?
Well, I don't have a specific date in mind. We had a new development, new information on the task force for the city center, and Travis has made some decisions, and we need to get together as a council and see what we want to do with that task force, if we want to reorient it, or if we want to turn it into an urban renewal task force, or if we want to drop it. And so I'd like to get that on the agenda so that those committee members know what's going on, and we go from there. And I would personally favor reforming their mission and having them do some good work for us.
Thanks, Joel. Yeah, we'll need to talk about that. We'll need to talk about that. I don't know that it's ready to put on the agenda again yet. Anything else to add? All right. How about a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Second from Vanessa. All in favor of adjourning today?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I do have a question for you. And that has to do with
We are adjourned. See you on Wednesday.